Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. How could you let this happen, Uncle? You bartered away my inheritance in my absence. Roderick Harlaw sighed, hearing his niece rant and rave about the current situation at Pike. He had dreaded this conversation ever since he stood back and allowed Victarion Greyjoy to take over Pike in the absence of Theon, or Usha. There was nothing I could do, Usha. For the sake of peace in the islands, I had to leave your uncle's ascension uncontested, said Roderick, which only further enraged his niece. I'll not have your peace, Uncle. The Seastone chair is mine. Usha screamed, Then you are offended at the wrong person. Your uncle does not hold the Seastone chair. It is now in the possession of the Lord of Avalon, Roderick said calmly. The frustrated scream that tore through his niece's throat was entirely predictable. Roderick was aware his niece had spent the better part of her formative years trying desperately to please and emulate Balon Greyjoy, a man he cursed almost every night for the ill fate he brought upon his daughter and their family. Ever since Theon was taken hostage after the first failed rebellion, Usha had tried her best to claim the position of heir of Pike. It was a futile attempt, and he had said so to his niece many times, but the girl was stubborn as a mule like her father. What would you have me do, Asha? Do you want civil war to break out amongst our people while our enemies are decimating us? Roderick asked with a shake of his head. But, look around you, child. Roderick snapped, losing his patience. Harlaw is now sworn to Avalon. Blacktide is now ruled by a northerner and filled with northern ships and northmen. This is not the time for your pettiness. And whose fault is that? While I was earning the iron price raiding the shores of the Summer Islands, you were busy losing to a wolf pup, Usha shouted. Your father's fault. He thought he could poke the wolf and not get bitten. Roderick retorted with a scowl. He was wrong, and now we're all suffering for it. I don't see you suffering, Uncle. I see you remain cozy in your precious library with your precious books. Usha snapped back, her dark eyes glaring balefully at him. Roderick let out a snort and shook his head in disappointment. Like your father, you are blind to the shifting world around you, girl. Roderick said harshly before dragging his niece out of his library despite her vocal protests. He was an old man way past his prime, but he had enough strength in his limbs to make sure his unruly niece followed him. The furious pace took him outside the walls of his ancestral home within a short time, and he pushed his niece towards the west side of the wall. You think me a coward, niece? You think I'm wasting away among my books, while I should be giving orders to my captains to sail my ships to defend your rights and secure the Iron Islands from the Starks? Roderick bellowed furiously. Look at the wall and see the price of defiance. Pikes lined the walls with many heads, crowning the tips. Some bodies were hung from the crenellations on ropes with their necks snapped. The Black Wolf is no mere pup. Your father underestimated the Starks twice and is now freezing his balls at the wall. That is the fate of all those captains who defied the edicts of the Lord of Avalon. Roderick nodded at the dead men lining his walls. If you persist in acting foolishly, your mother might one day wake up in the morning and find your head decorating this wall, and it'll break her heart. That is a sight I'd like not to see in my old age. How did they? Usha asked, wide-eyed, recognizing some of the captains from her time sailing the seas. The Northerners have spies amongst our men. Some of our best sailors and captains have been shifting loyalties to Harrion Stark after each passing day. Our builders are leaving our shores for Avalon, attracted by the promise of gold and a life of affluence. Blacktide is turning into a northern stronghold under Leopold Tallheart. It won't be long before the Northerners start taking over the rest of the home islands. So tell me, Usha, do you think my time is better spent on preserving what we have or throwing it all away by fighting on your behalf against Victarion Greyjoy? Roderick asked, leaving his niece stumped. Roderick forcibly calmed himself, seeing Usha falling silent. While Victarion commands Pike, he's doing a poor job so far. He has been unable to build back even a quarter of our strength in the sea. Why? What's stopping him from rebuilding the Iron Fleet? Usha asked, folding her hands under her breasts with a dissatisfied look. The Stark fleet, Nice? I don't know how, but whenever an Ironborn longship leaves our ports for reaving, they never come back, said Roderick. How is that possible? Does the Starks have that many ships watching over our ports? Asha asked with trepidation. Roderick saw her eyes going to her own ship, Blackwind. Your ship is safe, Asha. Only those ships that go for reaving are attacked. Most of our ships that go for trade are not attacked by the Stark fleet, Roderick said, patting Asha's shoulder to put her at ease. But how? We have many ports like Lord Sport scattered across the islands. I refuse to believe Starks are keeping watch over all of our ports and know which ships to attack, Asha asked.
I don't know how, and I don't frankly care at this point.
Harry Stark is a cold, ruthless fellow like the northern winter. There are rumors spreading the islands that he killed the drowned god. Asha scoffed upon hearing that. I didn't take you for a godly man, uncle, said Asha. I'm not, but unfortunately, the rest of our people, even your uncle, swore he saw the Stark boy pull the drowned god from the ocean's depths and kill it. It's a rumor that most of our people are believing in. Asha, the fear that pervades Ironborn's mind, is not easily scrubbed away, and now they're seeing our best reavers dying like flies. That fear only grows several folds. Then what do you suggest that I do? Do you want me to give up my claim on Pike and cower in fear of a wolf's shadow for the rest of my life? Asha asked in frustration. No, girl, I want you to be smart. You have a brother in Winterfell. Seek him out and enlist his help to befriend the Black Wolf. Use their strength to your advantage if you want to thrive in these islands. Roderick suggested. Befriend the Stark who humiliated my father. Are you mad? Asha asked incredulously. It is not madness to befriend those who are stronger than us, Asha. Not every issue can be solved by the force of arms and ships. If you hope to lead the Ironborn, you must use your mind and outthink your opponents, because no self-respecting Ironborn lordling would allow you to ascend over their heads without a fight, said Roderick. What makes you think my brother has any sort of influence with the Starks? Asha asked after a moment of quietly thinking over everything that was said so far. Roderick could only shake his head. Think, girl. Why did Lord Stark spare young Theon when Balon launched an attack on the north? He could see Asha stop a moment and give his question some serious thought. Now, you see, seek out your brother and enlist his aid. Together, you two might stand a chance to wrestle the control of Pike from Victarion. Alone, you stand no chance, Roderick said, squeezing his niece's shoulder. He had no hope that Asha or Theon could convince Harry and Stark to help them gain control over Pike. But he hoped that Asha would regain her sibling and abandon her mad ambitions of ruling the Iron Islands in the image of her father. The legacy of Balon Greyjoy should end with him, Roderick thought. I still don't understand how a mirror can help us keep in touch with home while we are in a faraway land, Rob commented, inspecting the giant mirror inside Harry's cabin. Like this, said Harry, tapping the mirror's surface with his power ring, Avalon, Maester, Marwyn. The mirror flickered before the reflection on the mirror changed to show Maester Marwyn reading a large tome on his desk. My lord? Marwyn looked up from his tome to stare at the mirror in confusion. Think nothing of it, Maester. I was just showing Rob how the mirror functions, said Harry with a dismissive wave. Oh! With another tap of his ring, the mirror went back to showing the reflection. That's incredible. Ravens could become useless if these mirrors are used in every castle. Rob said excitedly, Don't get your hopes up, brother. I don't think sharing these mirrors with other houses is a good idea. Empowering them to transmit all kinds of messages at the speed of light is not exactly a sound move from a future Lord of Winterfell. Harry deadpanned. Forget I said anything, said Rob after a moment of thought. I'll try, but I make no promises, Harry teased, before going back to reading the book in his hand with his feet on the table. You know, I didn't thank you for convincing Father to let me go on this trip with you. I was desperately hoping to stay away from Winterfell, said Rob. Harry looked up from the book on Braavos culture he had borrowed from Maester Luwin to stare curiously at Rob. Now, what would make you think that? Harry asked. Winterfell was getting overcrowded with all the lords and their daughters. I suppose you don't feel it, but the expectations of me are so high, and I don't think I can ever live up to them. Of course, don't think I'm blaming you, brother. It's just frustrating at times, said Rob. Harry stared at his downtrodden twin with a critical eye. Rob, do you remember the tale of Torrance Stark? Harry suddenly asked. The king who knelt. Rob asked with a frown. The very same. Of course. Torrhen Stark was the last king of winter. He knelt before Aegon and surrendered his crown without a fight. He was the only king to do so in the Seven Kingdoms, said Robb. Yes, he didn't fight Aegon and his sister wives. He only marched down the neck and knelt at the trident after Aegon and his sisters arrived atop their dragons. The people still deride him for surrendering without a fight, but I see him as one of the best among the Winter Kings. Do you know why? Robb remained silent, but he was listening keenly. I like him because, despite the overwhelming favor for war among his lords, he boldly decided to do nothing and merely bend his knee. He saved thousands of lives on that day with that single act. He preserved the North and Stark rule over the North for generations to come. He was willing to take in all the blame for the benefit of his people and descendants. Being a leader is a thankless job. No matter what decision you take, someone will be offended somewhere. A good leader listens to all the opinions presented to him, but ultimately listens to his own heart. Similarly, you don't have to do anything that others say or do something that others expect of you. When the time comes, you'll rule Winterfell and the North. Just listen to your heart and rule as Torrhen Stark did. Robb laughed. It's not as easy as you say, brother. Of course not. That's why you have me, Jon, and the rest of our family. No one said you've got to rule alone, said Harry. Besides, this trip should boost your negotiating skills with foreign rulers. Fenris chose that moment to make himself known by letting out a low growl from where the direwolf was resting. See? Even Fenris agrees, said Harry. When the blue ocean disappeared from beneath the airship and the land appeared, the ship's captain alerted the entire ship, which happened to be Anya. Harry had initially hoped to bring Sullis Pool with them as the airship captain on their trip, but the situation in the Iron Islands demanded the man's presence in Avalon. After all, Sullis Pool oversaw the response team that acted out missions for the fleet in tracking and destroying Ironborn ships sailing the Sunset Sea, intent on raiding the shores of Westeros. The plan was to strangulate the Ironborn and diminish their naval battle capability in the next 3 decades. Of course, he had ordered to spare the trade ships setting sail from all the major ports of the Iron Island. While he considered the Ironborn his enemy and their culture an anathema, he was not cruel enough to let them starve on their miserable island. Of course, some trigger-happy officers in his fleet occasionally sank any Ironborn ships they could find. He had those sent to the Bear Islands to oversee the transport of ice to the southern kingdoms. Transporting and unloading ice in the southern ports were some of the most tedious jobs for such trigger-happy idiots who refused to follow standard orders during peacetime. But Harry also recognized the value of enthusiastic soldiers. That was why he refused to send the few sailors charged with the crime of attacking trade ships of the Ironborn into guard duty in trade vessels of Avalon. "My lord, we've reached black tide," said Anya as Harry walked into the ship's command bridge. "Take us down, Captain," said Harry. The airship sailed smoothly in the sky and slowly started descending as it neared the castle adjoining the port that hosted a portion of his fleet. The ships anchored at the port flew the wolf banner, and so far they had done an excellent job cleaning out the reavers and pirates. The slave trade, supported by the Ironborn, had come to a screeching halt as he had used the Marauder's map to its full effect. "Robb and I will only take a moment. You can stay put in the ship," said Harry, looking at Jon, Elsera, Gisera, and Jojen. Once their ship landed, Harry and Robb disembarked with 2 armed guards flanking them. The port and the castle came alive as people surrounded the airship. The guards of House Tallheart kept the crowd under control while Lord Leopold welcomed them into his partially built home. The original castle of House Blacktide was destroyed during the war, and the current one was being built around an old fort that had gone into disrepair. Harry's eyes found Lord Leopold's family accompanying the man. By appointing Leopold Tallheart as the Lord of Blacktide, he had earned the goodwill of House Tallheart and Hornwood, as the man's wife was a Hornwood. It also helped that Lord Leopold was an agreeable person who had happily accepted the deal of a 50-year lease of the ports on the island in return for a reduced tax levy. The island's economy depended entirely on the shipping traffic that came into the ports from Avalon. The glass trade had been booming since the Ironborn lost their fleet, allowing Harry to move his ships into the ports along the Sunset Sea. The ice trade boomed once he started having the ships deliver ice as far as Dorne. Ice was a luxury the Desert Kingdom could not live without, as found by the increasing demand for ice from the north. The tricky part of the ice trade was preserving the solid structure for use. Harry went with the simple method of selling charmed boxes to preserve the temperature inside, which maintained the structural integrity of ice for an indefinite period. Lord Harrion, Lord Robb, welcome to Black Tide. My family and I heartily welcome you. Lord Leopold bowed respectfully, as did his family, before offering them guest rights. Thank you, my lord, said Robb. A few minutes later, Harry and Robb were seated in a tower, with Leopold Tallheart. Harry didn't waste any time, and explained in detail the plan to cut a canal across the neck, and how it increased the shipping traffic once the free cities started sending their trade vessels. Black Tide was one of the best stopgap ports in the Sunset Sea, while sailing towards the southern shores of Westeros. So another port has to be built on the island. Lord Leopold said, looking thoughtfully at the map of the island. Yes, we think it'd be better to build another harbor exclusively for merchant vessels, said Robb. It'd lessen the burden on the current port and have it repurposed for our fleet. Yes, that's possible. Lord Leopold nodded tentatively, but I'll need more workers and more gold. I'll inform Sir Celos Poole of our agreement. Sir Celos will arrange everything you need, said Harry. Then I'll ensure the work is finished speedily. Lord Leopold vowed. Good. Now on to other matters. Has there been any issues from Harlaw? Harry asked. Not recently, however. Our spies have informed me about the arrival of Asha Greyjoy. She and her fellow Reavers are currently staying put at Harlaw. Asha Greyjoy, the Theon's sister? Robb asked curiously. Yes, brother. Lord Harlaw told me she was away from the Iron Islands during the war. It's a tradition among the Ironborn to prove their mettle in the sea by reaving distant shores to earn their iron price. She must have been proving herself capable of command by raiding ships near the Stepstone, Harry explained. Balon Greyjoy allowed his daughter to command his ships? Robb asked, with surprise. Rumor was that Balon wanted to replace Dion as his heir. The Lord Reaper of Pike had the girl trained with his finest captains. Leopold said, Are they planning on contesting Victarion Greyjoy's rule? Harry asked curiously. I don't know, my lord. Lord Leopold shrugged. The lords of the Iron Islands have not gathered at Harlaw. If Asha Greyjoy intends to stake her claim on Pike, she'll need the support of other Ironborn captains and lords. That's disappointing. A civil war between these pirates would have been of immense benefit to us, Harry said, earning a look of shock from Robb. I suspect you won't be disappointed, my lord. If we've learned of Asha Greyjoy's arrival at Harlaw, it stands to reason Daenerys Shan has also learned the same, said Lord Leopold. Harry nodded while frowning thoughtfully. He had left the issue of Pike vague while withdrawing his fleet from the Iron Islands to facilitate infighting among the Ironborn. He worried that the Iron Throne would step in, but the small council had turned a blind eye to the Ironborn. He hoped they maintained the disinterest for some more time. Maybe they're also waiting to see whether the Greyjoys force a civil war on the Ironborn. The royal fleet is not far away to take action. Harry mused, I'll inform Sir Celos to keep the fleet on high alert. If Victarion makes a move, the fleet will be prepared to have the conflict confined to the islands and far away from our shipping lanes. Clouds flew past Harry as the airship sailed through the sky at a moderate speed. He stayed near the ship's railing, enjoying the wind rushing past his face. The rushing wind reminded him of the times he'd often use his firebolt in his homeworld. His attempts to create a broom had been only partially successful. The broom he had made suffered from maneuverability in transit, which forced him to reduce its maximum speed for safety purposes. A broom without speed was like a bird without wings. The entire purpose of the broom became inconsequential without the element of speed in the equation. Despite his relative success with the flying carpet, a fast broom appeared to be way out of his league for the time being. It seemed he was not as good as a professional charms master, but he had not given up hope. He was still working on creating the charms that worked seamlessly with the rest of the spells on the broom. The salty scent in the air was something Harry liked to enjoy, as it reminded him of the white sandy beaches of Avalon. They had left the mainland of the north behind and were fast approaching the Three Sisters. He had only been away from Avalon for a week and was already feeling nostalgic. Harry found John. Join him at the aft of the ship. John. Harry acknowledged his brother with a nod. Did you enjoy sailing the ship? Harry asked once he saw John relax while staring at the ocean below. Anya is a tough teacher, John said diplomatically. Sailing the airship, it's not as exciting as you thought, right? Harry asked with a chuckle. It's not, but Robb seems to enjoy it. Good for him. I was hoping he might because I was planning to gift him an airship as a birthday gift. Really? Oh yes, It'd be remiss if the future Lord of Winterfell does not have the means of reaching the sky when his bannermen have it, said Harry. Bannermen? Jon looked confused. Of course. I'm talking about myself and you, said Harry. I don't have the ability to touch the sky. Jon said, shaking his head, that can change if you're ready to embrace the inheritance of both sides of your parents. What do you mean? Jon asked cautiously while Harry grinned at him. Didn't you find it strange that only you could wield magic like I could among the Starks? Once you found out about your true heritage, didn't you think even for a moment, maybe that's why I can use magic like Harrion? Anya can use magic like you, and she is not even a Stark, much less one with Targaryen blood. Jon pointed out, Good. Harry suddenly smiled. Blood has nothing to do with magical ability. To be blessed with magic is fortuitous. Magic does not see a distinction between a king, a lord, a knight, or a peasant. However, the Dragon Lords of Valyria were cunning enough to ensure the dragons of their homeland were bound to their bloodline. They made certain changes in their blood so that their descendants were predisposed to bond with dragons. This is why only certain bloodlines could bind a dragon as their familiar and become dragon riders. I don't understand. What has dragons got to do with everything? Harry cut in smoothly. Come with me, Jon. Harry led a confused but intrigued Jon into a different chamber inside the airship, where he kept two large trunks. He opened the lid of the red trunk and stepped halfway into the expanded space before looking at Jon. Come in. I have a surprise for you, said Harry. Though amazed out of his mind, Jon followed Harry into the expanded space of the trunk. What is this? Jon asked. Harry shot his brother an endearing smile. You could say it's destiny or fate, but let's just say it's your birthright, said Harry, leading Jon further into the spatial dimension inside the trunk. The sparingly lit stairway gave away as they suddenly stepped onto a lush green hill where they were greeted by herds of sheep, pigs, cows, and buffalo grazing without a care in the world. Bright blue sky could be seen as far as their eyes could see, with a glowing globe of light floating in the sky in the likeness of the sun. Wow, how is this possible? Jon looked around in awe. With magic, anything is possible, said Harry with a playful gleam in his eyes. I don't know how often I've said that, but it never gets old. But there is an entire world packed inside a trunk. How? How is that possible? Jon looked around with wide eyes as he struggled to comprehend the enormity of what he was seeing. Space expansion charms and weather controlling charms. You'll learn that if you show more promise in your magical studies. You mean I can also create something like this? Jon asked incredulously. In time, yes. From the beginning, I told you that magic is more versatile and powerful than sword waving, Harry said with a chuckle, seeing the gobsmacked face Jon was sporting. Harry took out the flying carpet from his pocket and enlarged it before letting it hover a few feet from the ground. Climb aboard, Jon. Our destination is beyond that hill, Harry said, nodding at the hill ahead. Harry watched Jon tentatively step onto the carpet. He waited until Jon was comfortably seated on the carpet before placing his right palm on it and urging it to fly. Whoa! Jon let out a shout before laughing his heart out as the air rushed past them. Harry pushed the carpet to fly at maximum speed, and they speared through the sky in a jiffy, with clouds rushing past them. This is so much better than the airship or a horse, Jon shouted with glee. Harry could only chuckle as his brother hollered like a Dothraki rider as they zoomed past several flocks of sparrows and ravens. Jon's shouting scared them away, and for a moment, Harry thought it was something in common between Jon and Snuggles. All right. We are nearly there, Harry shouted over the whistling air for Jon to hear. They passed by the huge hill that he later pointed out to Jon. On the other side of the hill was a large valley filled with rocks, pine trees, and a small lake. Wow, that's so beautiful, Jon said in awe as the carpet dived towards the valley. They skimmed just above the rocky terrain and the lake as they flew towards the line of pine trees on the shores near the lake. Jon reached out with his hand, letting it glide over the water's surface. From here on out, be on your guard. You remember the shield charm, don't you? What? What's out there? Jon asked, a little bit afraid. Harry was tempted to tease Jon a little by making up a ghost story, but he fought down that urge. You'll soon find out. Just be on your guard. Harry patted Jon's shoulder as he lowered the carpet near the line of pine trees. Once they had their feet on the ground, Harry shrunk the flying carpet and stuffed it into his pocket. Let's walk, said Harry, leading Jon into the woods. Harry remained alert while scanning his surroundings with his magic. Unlike Winter, Snuggles was a fierce predator that took great pleasure in hunting. The dragon loved to hide among woods and hunt its prey or snatch sheep and cows by diving quickly from the sky. It loved terrorizing every creature inhabiting the dimension, but was also intelligent enough to know that killing for sport would dry up its food source. Snuggles learned that lesson the hard way when it tried to burn and kill everything that moved in the dimension. Harry had to bind the dragon inside the pine forest under heavy wards, isolating the dragon inside a geofence. Ever since that incident, Snuggles had been cautious in hunting inside the dimension and cautious in its interaction with Harry. Whenever Harry approached the fire dragon, it had always been cautious, but also looked for a weakness to exploit. Somewhere along the way, Snuggles had started to consider him an enemy. That was why Harry remained alert inside the woods. The dragon was temperamental, and so, unlike Winter, perhaps I should have taken a more hands-on approach in the dragon's formative years, Harry thought. But then again, he never planned to bond with the fire dragon. He had always planned to have the dragon either bond with Jon or grow up independently without any familiar bonds forming with anyone. He had done the same with Winter, and that had worked fabulously. Winter was friendly towards him, but at the same time, the she-dragon was never familiar like Fenris. Winter was more like a friend than anything else. She did things her way, and Harry had always respected her freedom. Not that she had ever done anything that jeopardized her freedom all these years. Harry and Jon finally arrived at a clearing where half-burnt skeletons and bones were lying around like a graveyard from a horror story. The ground was littered with ashes, and the burnt smell pervaded their noses. He scanned the huge pine tree beneath which Snuggles slept, but found no traces of the fire dragon. "Harry, what is all this? What could do this?" Jon asked nervously, keeping his power ring ready while his eyes darted around, looking for a threat. "You can stop playing this game. Come out," Harry shouted, feeling a sliver of raw magic from the fire dragon. Despite the dragon's strenuous efforts, it could never conceal its magic from his senses. He admitted dragons had superior eyesight and smell, but his ability to perceive magic was far greater than its ability to observe and hear from afar. The leaves to his left moved, and from among the high branches of the pine trees emerged the fire dragon he had teasingly named Snuggles. It was a harmless name born out of the dragon's penchant for snuggling up to anything immovable while sleeping. Even to this day, the dragon slept soundly by snuggling close to the lone pine tree at the center of the clearing. The golden scales of the dragon gleamed brightly. Its eyes were blood red, which made it look more of a terrifying creature than beautiful, as its gleaming body would suggest. The fire dragon was one of its kind, with its golden scales. Only one Targaryen dragon was said to have gold scales. Sunfire, the dragon of Aegon II. It was a fierce dragon that killed more than its fair share of dragons and men. Like Sunfire, Snuggles was also a fierce dragon primed for battle. All its mannerisms suggested this, which was why Harry hoped the dragon would bond with Jon. He had kept the dragon free of any bonds till now, but its fierce mannerisms pointed to a wild dragon, which was disastrous. The ritual that resurrected the fire dragon had granted it some of the better qualities of the ice dragon race. The ability to speak was one such quality Snuggles earned from the ritual, and Harry rightly feared the dragon also inherited longevity. He hoped increased interaction or bonding with Jon would settle the dragon's more dangerous tendencies. "Is that Jon?" gasped. "Yes, that's a dragon." "How did you—" "I came by a dragon egg at Skane. Later, I hatched it, but that dragon won't bond with anyone without Valyrian blood. There is a small chance that you could bond with it." "Harrion! I don't think I should try this," Jon muttered with clenched teeth. "Do not think of the blood of Valyria as a curse. Your mother's blood long ago won over the fire in your blood. After all, you don't look like a silver-haired idiot. You are a proper Northman. Now go out there and tame the dragon. It's your birthright." With that pep talk delivered, Harry stood back and let Jon do the rest. Harry observed the dragon from afar. It was larger than Winter and almost twice the size of a horse. The aggressive soul and blood magic the Valyrians had crafted into the Valyrian dragons had left them predisposed to grow aggressively large in a magic-rich environment. In his studies of the Targaryen dragons, he had noticed that the accounts of the dragons that grew up in King's Landing were noticeably weaker than their counterparts in Dragonstone. Even their flames had grown weaker once dragons started growing away from Dragonstone. His research into the Targaryen bloodline had also revealed some crucial knowledge. The Valyrians were immensely competent in blood magic and had formed a new race of nearly perfect human breeds of men and women with their Dragonlord families. By means that were frankly horrible, the Valyrians had perfected and cultivated certain traits within their bloodline using dragon blood. It was the work of the finest combination of alchemy and blood magic he had ever seen. Therefore, Harry was also confident in Jon's chances to bond with Snuggles. Harry winced and held himself from acting against the dragon when it snarled at Jon as he made his way towards the dragon. He could see the dragon eye him, and then Jon with an intensity behind its eyes. Harry could see that it was working things out to some extent. To Jon's credit, he was taking things seriously with a small protective layer of magic enveloping his left arm. Harry could feel the small stream of magic. The power ring on Jon's hand was flooding like a cocoon, enveloping Jon like a shield. Harry moved his eyes towards the dragon as Jon once again moved towards the dragon. The dragon reared its head and spat out a globe of gold flame at Jon. Fortunately, Jon batted away the flame with his magic. Harry could see the surprise on Snuggles' face as it realized Jon was not a hapless stranger, but one that wielded magic. The dragon looked at Harry once again, realizing that Harry was not a lone magic user capable of withstanding its flames. All right, now, smell the blood, Snuggles. Smell the dragon blood, Harry muttered to himself as Jon made several bold steps towards the dragon. The dragon swayed its head slowly as it watched Jon's movements carefully. Now, Harry could see the dragon was sniffing out Jon and sensing the faint call of the Dragonlord blood in Jon's veins. Diminished though it might be, Jon had dragon blood running through his veins. The call of that blood to a dragon was not something it could easily ignore. To Harry's immense satisfaction, Jon reached out and touched Snuggles on its neck. A wide smile stretched on his face as the dragon slowly started to get more comfortable around Jon. Well, it looks like my plan worked seamlessly, Harry muttered with some satisfaction. It was a start, and Harry hoped Jon could train better during this trip. This trip was not merely for the sake of business and adventure. The next few months were a crucial part of training for Robb and Jon. After all, the political game of Westeros was merely a means to an end. The real struggle was always with the enemy that was beyond the wall. "It's all done, my lord. They are ready to be deployed," said Anya. Harry nodded as he walked among the snitches. His Valkyrie had painstakingly created with several months of labor. The runic inscriptions for tracing out the map of the waters surrounding the Three Sisters were a challenging task. But he and his Valkyrie had done the same for the Iron Islands. Therefore, he didn't expect anything to go awry at this juncture. "That's a lot of metal balls," Robb breathed, staring at the gleaming bronze surface of the snitches lying on the ship's hull. "So these metal balls have runestones inside them?" Jon asked. "Yes," Harry nodded. "What exactly does they do?" Robb asked curiously, poking one snitch with the index finger and jumping back when the snitch swatted his finger away with its wings. "They'll flood the place with their detection magic and show us the real-life map of the area. In this case, we'll know ship movement surrounding the Three Sisters on the all-seeing table," Harry explained while a grin tugged at the corner of his mouth, watching Robb get rebuffed by the snitches while trying to pick one of them up. "So we can see the movements of pirate ships," said Jon, thoughtfully. "Yes, we can keep watch over the islands for any naval movements. Once we have the contact mirrors installed on all northern ships, we can warn our ships to steer clear of pirates. Until then, the Manderleys can send escort ships to fight off the pirate ships harrying their merchant ships," said Harry. "That's impressive. How does that work exactly?" Robb asked, and he elaborated further when Harry raised an eyebrow curiously. "I mean, even if we can see the position of a pirate ship on the map, it doesn't necessarily mean an escort ship might know the location. All captains know the safe lanes they use on the sea. They usually use star positions at night, and almost all Manderley ships carry a compass. The captains of the scout ships can sail after the merchant ship using their expertise in the sea." "But wouldn't it be better if this map is made available for the scout ships?" Robb asked curiously. That gave Harry pause, as he had never thought of doing something like that. It was primarily because of paranoia. Because some captains tend to turn to piracy or are somehow involved with pirates. After all, not everyone was incorruptible. However, Harry also saw the merit in Rob's idea. He could think of an elite task force specifically created to tackle piracy in the seas within the fleet. Something like that could be useful. Perhaps these ships could be a different class of ships. That way, I wouldn't have to connect all ships to the map's grid. Maybe even a separate rank of officers could be created. Harry mused. That's actually a splendid idea. Maybe we could try this out at Avalon, and if successful, we can request the Manderleys to adopt the same. Harry suggested making Rob happy. So, how are these snitches planted? Do you just throw them into the sea? Asked John. Harry shook his head before applying the voice-magnifying charm on his throat. All snitches, deploy! A low buzzing sound emanated from the snitches before it became a loud buzzing. As all the snitches rose in the air, beating their tiny wings, the panels on the airship's hull folded back, allowing the snitches to escape like a swarm. Once outside the airship, the snitches flew away in different directions. The bottom panels sealed themselves shut, and Harry led his brothers to the chamber, where one of the all-seeing tables was kept. Harry pressed his power ring against the table's surface, and the table lit up with a map of everything between Sea Dragon Point and the Iron Islands. The map showed different colored dots moving slowly in the sunset sea. Wow, Rob breathed, seeing the intricate details of the map. Once the snitches settle in, they'll trace out the area and all the activities involved in the region, said Harry. Just as Harry finished saying that, a new map started to form on the table, making John and Rob gasp. Once we're finished here, we'll have the map connected to the all-seeing table in Avalon. After that, we leave for Braavos. John took a deep breath as he stared at the massive structure of the Titan of Braavos. The enormous structure of a warrior made of granite and bronze gleamed as the first rays of dawn shined in it. He supposed he was among the luckiest few fortunate to see the Titan up close and on level with its head, thanks to the airship. He supposed some of his Targaryen ancestors might have seen the same thing he saw on their dragons when they visited the free city of Braavos. John took a few steps back, startled when a roar came from the mouth of the Titan. What the? John spluttered. That's the roar of the Titan. Whenever a ship approaches the statue, it roars to warn the arsenal, Harry explained. How's that possible? Is the statue alive? John asked incredulously. Of course not. It's most likely a combination of several horns operated by men in a cleverly designed chamber that amplifies sound. After all, the Braavosi are not solely famed for their shipbuilding capabilities, said Harry. So, there is no magic involved, John asked, a pinch disappointed. Not that I know of. Maybe there is some magic involved. Harry said thoughtfully before a gleam entered his eyes that made John uneasy. Tell you what, let's find that out tonight. It'll be an adventure like never before, Harry suggested. Is that wise? I mean, wouldn't the Braavosi be cross with us if we violate their treasured possessions? John asked hesitantly, but he also liked the idea of investigating the Titan. John didn't know why, but he was getting a strange feeling from the Titan. It felt like something familiar was gnawing at the edges of his mind, but for the life of him he could not discern what it was. They'll be cross with us if they find us. What they don't know won't hurt them. Besides, there is something interesting in the Titan's roar. I'm sure you've also felt it. John nodded slowly while eyeing his brother out of the corner of his eyes. He got the feeling Harry suspected something, but gleaning anything from Harry was as difficult as earning the trust of a dragon. Yes, but I don't know what it is, John muttered, frowning intently at the Titan's mouth. Well, that makes the two of us, brother. Harry patted John's shoulder. I've been thinking of telling the truth to Rob, John suddenly said as the airship started to lower itself as they approached the Titan. It's not time. Harry shook his head. But John started. You'll have to wait, John. Trust me. Harry said firmly, staring ahead. Our priority must be to keep your heritage a secret from everyone. The less number of people who know this secret, the better. But Rob is my brother. I trust him. John argued. Good. Then make sure you tell the truth after Theon Greyjoy leaves. Winterfell. The shield? John blinked in surprise. What you... Rob has many good qualities. But one bad habit he picked from our father is that he is blind to the shortcomings of his friends, said Harry. John cut himself off when he found Rob coming towards them to join them on the ship's bow. So, what's the plan? Are we supposed to fly in like this in broad daylight? Rob asked. That's exactly the plan. The whole point of going into Braavos on the airship was to show them we rule the skies, said Harry, making John frown. Aren't the Braavosi our allies? John asked, confused. Allies? Harry raised an eyebrow. Have we ever signed an alliance agreement with Braavos, to your knowledge? But we trade with Braavos. John's forehead creased. We also trade with Pentos, Mir, Tyrosh, Lys Volantis, and anyone willing to trade with us on the other side of the Narrow Sea. That doesn't make them our allies. Robb pointed out. Exactly, Harry beamed. Braavos is a valued trade partner. We have no military alliance with the Sea Lord, and that places them squarely with the rest of the free cities. The only difference is that our volume of trade with Braavos exceeds compared to any other polity on the other side of the Narrow Sea. But we hope to make them an ally, right? Robb asked. In time, yes. For now, we only need trade agreements from them. Our focus should be on that alone, said Harry. Jon wanted to remind Harry how contradictory that was. Only a moment ago, his brothers suggested they sneak into the Titan to see what was making that roar. It was not exactly the work of a trade delegation, but he had enough grace not to point that out to his brother. Well, at least we know for sure Arya would be disappointed to learn the Titan does not come to life to smash the enemies of Braavos and eat highborn ladies. Jon said amusedly, making his brother laugh. Old men have such wild imaginations, said Robb, smiling fondly at the memory of old Nan telling them fantastical tales about the Titan. All right, enough dallying. We have people to meet and deals to be made. Harry clapped his hands and led them back to their rooms to get ready. They were quick to make themselves presentable as the airship lowered from the clouds. They all saw the famed arsenal of Braavos after they bypassed the towering visage of the Titan. The fortified shipyard of Braavos was famed for building one ship every day. It was a fanciful claim to make, but Jon saw the hundreds of galleys anchored at the infamous shipyard at the entrance of Braavos Lagoon and changed his mind. Look at those battlements on the top of that rock. No fleet could bypass them. Robb pointed a finger at the arsenal. Sure enough, Jon found several huge siege engines, Scorpions and Spitfires atop the knob of rock overlooking the arsenal. The hundreds of galleys moored at the shipyard sported the banners of Braavos fluttering in the wind. Look at those galleys. It's no wonder no other fleet could defeat them, Robb said, looking at the rows upon rows of galleys anchored at the shipyard. Alyn Valerian defeated them at the Stepstones, Jon absently said, making Robb look at him in surprise. Is that true? Robb asked, turning his sights on Harry. It must be true. I'll trust Jon's expertise on the subject of battles of the past, Harry said amusedly. They fell silent and enjoyed the view of the city of Braavos sprawled out in all its splendor across a chain of islands. Unlike other sail ships, the airship was not supposed to be anchored in a harbor. Instead, arrangements were made ahead of their arrival in Braavos, and Jon was only learning about them now from Harry. Looking down from the ship, he could see some of those arrangements. A large circle was painted on the ground of a huge mansion where the airship was supposed to land. Under Lady Anya's captaincy, the airship lowered steadily towards the painted circle. He also noticed the people gathered nearby under the shade of the mansion, waiting for their arrival. The Manderley colors were easily spotted among the company of men and women waiting on the ground. I had sent the Manderleys ahead of our arrival to Braavos to arrange our lodgings near the Purple Harbor. It'll only take a few minutes of walk to reach the Sea Lord's palace where the negotiations will be held, Harry explained. Jon bleakly noticed there was not a single tree inside the city sprawled out over the many islands. It was as if the Braavosi had leveled their islands with bricks and turned all their trees into ships. However, he did spot some greenery among the huge mansions he could see from the airship, but they were a rarity in the city. His attention was diverted back to what was happening on the bow of the airship, as the household guards of House Stark arranged themselves neatly dressed in fine armor and armed with the finest swords and spears. Ser Hollis Malin led the guards in the absence of Ser Jari and Ser Roderick. A slight tremor passed through the airship as it touched down on the ground, but otherwise remained stable as always. The side panel on the starboard side of the airship folded inwards, and a long wooden pathway formed outwards until it touched the ground. Jon quickly joined Harry's and Robb's side, with guards led by Sir Holland flanking them from all sides. Together, they disembarked the ship, and Jon took notice of Lylus and Wendell Manderley among the delegation receiving them on the ground. A thin, short man with slicked black hair, dressed in a fine red silk doublet and black breeches, stepped forward with a smile. Lord Harry, Lord Robb, my name is Titus Ethrion. On behalf of the Iron Bank, let me say it is an honor to welcome you into our city. The honor is ours, said Robb with a slight nod. We've only heard of Braavos' beauty and the famed Titan in tales in the pages of books in the library. We're heartened to see your city's beauty exceeds the words of the maesters of the Citadel. Harry greeted back with a smile. Jon was thankful he was left alone to his own devices while a swarm of courtiers of the Sea Lord and several other representatives of the Iron Bank swept away Harry and Rob. Instead of participating in any of the talks, he went straight to his room. Along the way, he found Lady Anya engaged in an expressive conversation with Alcera Snow near the controlling bridge of the airship. I suppose Rob is not the only one learning to fly the airship, Jon mused. He didn't dally around to see what they were talking about, and instead he went straight to his room. Along the way, he passed by the household guards of House Stark, of Winterfell, and Avalon alike. At one point, he had hoped to be one of these men, or even just a brother of the Night's Watch, serving side by side with his uncle Benjen Stark. But that was no longer possible because his ambitions had changed. His options were not so small or reduced, all thanks to Harrion. It all started with the Stark name. He desperately yearned for it, and Harrion delivered it to him on a dime without Jon ever asking for it. But now, he knew he was not a bastard of Ned Stark. He was the bastard son of Rhaegar Targaryen. He was a dragon seed of the Targaryen dynasty, which his uncle had righteously overthrown for the crimes committed against his grandfather, uncle, and mother. But the story of House Targaryen should not end with Aerys and Rhaegar. Harry helped him see beyond his hatred for the duo and what the Targaryens and even the Valyrians represented. While Jon saw the violence, greed for power, and endless expansionist wars, Harrion taught him to see their magic and how that empowered them. According to Harrion, the Valyrians failed to utilize the magic and use it to empower the people of Essos. They refused to share their magic with the rest of the world and jealously held on to its might to empower themselves. Jon understood what his brother was saying. He realized the failing of Valyria was in using their magic to subjugate the rest of the world and its people instead of freeing them. Harrion had used his magic to conquer 2 islands of the Iron Islands. Once he did that, he gave them the benefits of trade and abolished the old ways of the Ironborn. All across the north, Harrion spread his magic and gave their people wealth and comfort. He gave them the opportunity to rebuild themselves, and Jon realized that was the true power of magic, freedom. He knew his brother alone could not spread the benefits of magic everywhere. But if Jon could help more substantially, the work could spread far and wide. Even the threat posed by the White Walkers could be averted with more magic on their side. With this noble goal in mind, Jon embraced the other half of the blood running in his body. He was determined to bring about great change in not just the North, but the whole North, using the dragon blood and the blood of the first men. But first, he needed to learn to bond better with his dragon and study more about magic from his brother. Closing the door behind him, Jon went straight towards a familiar-looking trunk in his room. Opening the lid, he stepped in, and with the aid of the flying carpet, he found Snuggles. He waved at the dragon, but the dragon just ignored him, making Jon sigh. Jon had his work cut out for him with a rebellious dragon in hand, which he was supposed to tame before returning home. "Are you sure this is the right place for this kind of discussion?" Harry asked, with a raised eyebrow. "Of course it is. Do you see anyone eavesdropping on our conversation, Lord Harrion?" Titus Etherion said happily. Harry looked around at the vacant bridge with carved faces staring at him from all corners. They sat on a bench on the bridge, overlooking the ships moored at the Purple Harbor. The bridge had a huge span and was made of stone and wood. From the highest point on the bridge, Harry could almost see all of the city. I suppose they aptly named the Bridge of Eyes, Harry thought, feeling a touch uncomfortable, feeling all the eyes of the carved faces on him. It was like the feeling he got from the Godswood of Winterfell, sans the magical power. "Now tell me more about this canal you're proposing," said Titus. "House Stark has decided to carve out a canal connecting the Bight with Saltspear at Neck. We'll do it in a way that it does not touch the Fever River," said Harry before taking a map from his pocket and letting it sprawl out on the bench. "That's an ambitious venture," Titus muttered, schooling his face so as not to show any emotions. "I suppose you are here to ask for our aid or a loan from the Iron Bank." "No, I'm here to negotiate a trade deal to set tariffs for Braavosi ships that cross the canal in the future." "You seem awfully certain you'd build the canal. How long is this canal?" "Less than 80 leagues long." "How long would such a venture take to complete in Westeros?" "It'll only take at most a month." "A month?" Titus asked incredulously. "I know it sounds fanciful, But I'm not talking about carving out a long canal using laborers that take years to finish the canal. Then what are you talking about? Titus asked with a frown. I can carve out the canal using magic. All expenses for the canal will be borne by myself. But before I build the canal, we need to come to an understanding. Harry watched as the Iron Bank representative went into a contemplative silence. Only the sound let out by seagulls patrolling the skies could be heard, as well as the steady lull of the sea. You're confident you can build this canal within a month? Titus asked, breaking his silence. I'll be gone one a trip across Essos. Once my journey is completed, I'll return to the north, and the work on the canal will be completed within a month. If this canal is completed, Braavosi ships will gain access to the western ports of Westeros. Titus slowly said, never taking his eyes off the map. More than that, it'll ensure the expansion of our glass trade, as well as the ice trade. Braavosi ships can access Avalon directly, and we can also do the same, said Harry. You'll need an audience with the Sea Lord and his advisors, Titus said. I've already requested an audience. That won't be necessary. Will you be comfortable meeting with the Sea Lord on the morrow? Of course. Good. I'll arrange the meeting. Eddard rubbed his eyes to alleviate the sleep that was consuming him, and tried to make sense of the numbers on his desk. The taxes collected from Sea Dragon Point were well above some of the wealthiest regions in the north combined, like Barrowton, White Harbor, and the Rills. But it was not just Sea Dragon Point. All regions in the north had been generating more taxes than usual. His son's lands just happened to be the most productive, and it was shown by the people migrating to the previously uninhabited area for better job opportunities. Farming and hunting were still the most popular jobs of the small folk, but Avalon had been offering people other avenues with glassmaking, shipbuilding, and now the ice trade. If Maester Luwin was correct, Bear Island was fast becoming wealthy because of the ice trade. The forest ice eater from the Lakes of Mormont lands was most sought after in the south. They even called it the Bear Ice. House Mormont had not only settled all their debts brought upon by Jorah Mormont, but they had also made a killing in the ice trade that left them with a reasonable sum of gold and silver going by the taxes the Mormonts had sent him. If only Ser Jorah had been patient, he could have had it all. Eddard thought with some disappointment. While he hated the former Lord of Mormont Keep for engaging in slavery, he acknowledged that the man was a good warrior. The ill repute the man's actions brought upon House Mormont would not be wiped away anytime soon. However, what kept him at night was not just the increased tax collected from the north. Maester Luwin had delivered a raven from Jon Arryn. Thankfully, his foster father had only good news to share. Lady Lysa Arryn had delivered a healthy boy, and they had named him Robert Arryn in honor of his late friend and brother in all but blood. The contents of the parchment should not have made him stay the night, but it was writing the response that he found difficult. Writing a congratulatory note was not a difficult task, but Eddard was also considering whether it was a good idea to inform Jon about the plans for building the canal. Usually the Iron Throne had no authority in any construction that happened inside respective kingdoms, but it was a courtesy to inform the king about it. The canal was something that changed the current shipping lanes of Westeros, changing the geography of the north, and the Westerosi continent was something he ought to inform the throne. At the same time, he knew a canal in the north that gave Essosi merchants access to the Sunset Sea would upset many in the south. That was why he had held off on informing the small council about the plans for the canal. Someone could act on the information and possibly disrupt Harrion's negotiations with the Braavosi. But it had been over a week since Harrion, Robb, and Jon departed for Braavosi. He hoped his sons had enough time to gain the audience of the Sea Lord and discuss the matter of the canal. Dipping his quill in the ink, Eddard began scribbling down a message on a fresh parchment. The very next day, a raven flew from Winterfell carrying his best wishes for Jon Arryn and a message for the small council about their plans for carving out the Sunset Canal. Of course, Eddard was purposefully vague about the whole matter and merely mentioned he had sent out surveyors to map out the best possible site for the canal at the neck. He left out his son's involvement as well as the magic that will be involved in the canal's construction. Considering the small council's disposition to the faith of the Seven, it was better to be as vague as possible. You must be joking for sure, Paxter Redwine said with a snort. Pedda wholeheartedly agreed with the feelings expressed by the master of ships. He hated the man with a passion for being a meticulous administrator, making it difficult for him to smuggle certain goods in or out of the city, but that doesn't mean he had to disagree with everything the man said. "I'm afraid I'm not as adept at making jokes as you think I am, Lord Redwine," Jon Arryn said, looking composed while staring at each face in the small council to show that he was serious. But this is preposterous. To cut a long canal along the neck connecting the narrow sea with the Sunset Sea is simply Grand Maester Gormund said while shaking his head. "It's impossible. As impossible as making ships that fly in castles from mud on a single night," Varys asked blandly. Baelish looked thoughtful at the question and realized the Master of Whispers was right. He admonished himself for his severe lack of judgment by ignoring the magical prowess of Cat's son. In his defense, it was difficult to keep track of the Stark boys' magical accomplishments and keep them in mind in meetings like these. He was only familiar with playing the game against regular players on an even field, not against a sorcerer of unimaginable powers. This left him wholly blindsided whenever the Stark boy was involved. Petyr struggled to think of an appropriate response to the news Jon Arryn had shared with the small council. A canal cut straight through the neck built by the Starks was one of the worst news he had heard in the last decade. If it becomes a reality, he could see the entire shipping from Braavos, Pentos, and maybe even Myr diverted to the canal. Not only would this enrich the North, but it also give them control over the flow of trade into Old Town, Lannisport, and the Arbor. There were also other locations along the western coasts that he excluded, especially in the Riverlands and the North. By controlling the canal, the North would control all trade between the Narrow Sea and the Sunset Sea. The political power amassed from such control would make the Starks far more powerful than they already were. On the other hand, Petyr was not so blinded by his dislike of House Stark that he ignored the obvious advantages of having a canal so close to his lands in the Fingers. While his land holdings were not particularly substantial or resource-rich, he could think of a few ways to enrich his lands from the benefit of shifting trade with the advent of a canal. He could build a port and have it serve as a supply station for ships from the southern free cities of Essos. But this also meant all his efforts to help the Marish pirates settle in the Three Sisters were wasted and detrimental to his renewed interest in the region. On one hand, he didn't want the North to gain more power. On the other, he was attracted by the lucrative opportunity to develop his lands. With his connections among the merchants in Westeros and abroad, No. The North should not be allowed to have the canal. They're already far too powerful. Petyr thought grimly, "I cannot get distracted by the possibility of making more gold." "Does the Lord Stark say how long it'll take them to build this canal?" Petyr asked curiously. "No, he does not." Jon Arryn shook his head. "A canal in the north should allow ships from Braavos and Pentos access to the Sunset Sea circumventing the Stepstones. The pirates would be out of their business if such a canal comes into existence," said Lord Redwine. "The pirates might extend their reach northward, coming into direct conflict with the royal fleet if ships avoid the Stepstones," Patrice Oakhart said, the newly sworn Master of Laws. "Is that possible?" Stannis suddenly asked, looking at Lord Redwine. One other thing Petyr was worried about was King Stannis. Unlike King Robert, Stannis Baratheon never missed a single small council meeting. The man was an able king and held court at least 2 days a week. A competent king on the Iron Throne was making his life very difficult in King's Landing, and a Stark boy with magical powers was making his revenge farther and farther away. An immense helpless feeling swelled up inside him, threatening to pull him into despair. It could be possible. Pirates are not exactly smart folk. They'll look to loot ships one way or the other, said Lord Paxter. Then we'll have to prepare for such an eventuality. We don't know when Lord Stark plans the construction, but we must be prepared for all eventualities, said Stannis. Your Grace, have you perhaps given a thought about the necessity of this canal? Petyr slyly asked before anyone else could say anything. What do you mean, Lord Baelish? Stannis asked, frowning at the Master of Coin. We have no pressing problems that require a canal to be built across the neck. Also, shouldn't your Grace have a say in this grand construction? Petyr asked. If the Lords of Westeros think they should start asking permission for anything they build on their lands using their gold and silver, then my office will be filled with such requests. So long as the Starks are building their canal in their lands, and there are no complaints from other lords whose lands this canal passes, I see no reason for my involvement. They are free to do whatever they want with their lands so long as they're not breaking any laws, said Stannis, after which he stared at the new Master of Laws. To my knowledge, there are no laws that prohibit Lord Stark from building something in his lands, said Patrice Oakheart. Lord Stark also informed us all beforehand courteously through Lord Aaron, Varys quipped, eyeing Petyr with a sly smile. We should be focusing our efforts on how this canal would impact our trade, and perhaps how that'll be received in Dorne, said Jon Arryn. Also, we need to contact Lord Eddard and ensure our enemies or pirates cannot access the canal. To Petyr's frustration, once again, his subtle attempts to stonewall House Stark lay in tatters. Instead, he'd have to hope that some hapless, no-good rivals of House Stark in Essos would do something. It was for the umpteenth time he was questioning the supposed prowess of assassins in Essos. So far, the Essos rivals of Harry Stark have stopped sending assassins, or they've stopped wasting their silver and resigned themselves to the existence of their rival. He could see no other reason why the wealthy Essos and Magisters were failing to have the troublesome Stark boy killed. Incompetent fools. Petyr thought with a scowl. Nonetheless, he decided to have the news of the canal's construction leaked to the enemies of House Stark. If someone got lucky and managed to hinder the canal somehow, then he'd count that as a win. It was a fool's hope, but he had nothing else in the arsenal to hurt the Starks. Petyr had to accept the grim reality that his foes in the north were far too powerful and untouchable by normal means. If only I had a mountain of gold, I could have enlisted the services of a faceless man. Jon could only stare in awe at the snowy hill upon which the ice dragon was lounging, candidly. To think he thought he had seen all the wonders of magic that had to offer from his brother. Once again, the world magic kept surprising him at every turn. The dragon had beautiful blue scales resembling finely cut crystals while gleaming like an ethereal giant blue gemstone. When Harry described the dragon, he was not mincing words. This has to be the most beautiful creature in the world, Jon thought, mesmerized by the dragon. She does not like to eat meat, she prefers leaves, especially from weirwood trees, and she can't breathe fire, but she breathes ice that can kill any living creature in the blink of an eye, like dragon fire. Harry explained. She only eats leaves? Jon asked to make sure his ears had not betrayed him. Yes, she does not eat meat, Harry answered. Jon could only feel more wonder and give up trying to understand the ways of magic. Have you managed to bond with her? Jon asked curiously. Dragons are not pets, Jon. I thought you'd have realized that by now after spending time with Snuggles. I understand that, but still... Jon looked expectantly at Harry. I've not flown on Winter, and no, there is no bond between us, said Harry. That's a shame. I think Sundancer can understand some of my wishes if I express them with more emotion. I don't know why you changed the name of the dragon. Snuggles was a perfect name for it. Harry argued. Are you kidding? Jon asked incredulously. He hated that name with a passion. Whenever I used that name, he spat fire at my face. You should have seen when he was young. He was such a cute dragon, and I gave him the cutest name possible, Harry said with a pained look. Jon shook his head. He could never have imagined Sundancer as cute. He was a fierce dragon who loved fighting, hunting, and killing. There was simply nothing else Sundancer found interesting. He had seen Sundancer watch an antelope bleed to death with rapt attention before consuming it whole. He wondered whether other Targaryen dragons of the past exhibited such strange character traits. We should leave. Even though Winter is not hostile to our presence, I get the feeling we stepped in during her nap time, said Harry. Once they stepped out of the trunk, Jon found a chair and sat down. What did the Sea Lord say? Jon asked. Nothing much. Robb informed the Sea Lord about the canal and our intentions to form a trade pact with Braavos. The Sea Lord asked for a few days to discuss the matter with his advisors. Will they agree? Jon asked with a frown, not without knowing whether they can secure lower port duties and tolls from us. They'll also need to know whether we have a tight leash over the Ironborn. What about the Sistermen? Jon asked. What about them? Harry raised an eyebrow. I thought the Sea Lord would be more concerned with the pirates working from the Three Sisters. Jon said confusedly. That's because Braavos has been fighting pirates for centuries, but they've never fought the Ironborn. A wise general will be more concerned with the foe they don't know than the one they know, said Harry. Jon supposed the Braavosi would learn everything they needed about the Ironborn once the canal opened, or maybe the Northern Fleet could wreak havoc on the Ironborn ships. Who knows what the future holds, Jon thought. Let's go get some sleep. Tomorrow we have many places to visit in the city, said Harry. The following day, Jon walked with Harrion, Robb, Alcera, Josera, and Anya towards the harbor under an armed escort. All three of them carried daggers on their person in case of an emergency. Not that he ever thought there would be any situation that called for the use of their weapons when they had Harry with them. Besides, the entire idea was Sirrah Hollis Mullins. Jon looked back at the mansion's gates, where people from all walks of life came to see the flying ships. Because of the swarm of people covering the mansion's walls, they had to take a secret tunnel to walk outside the boundaries without notice. People from across the city's many islands were pouring into the island to see the ship. Some came hoping to see a dragon because some people were under the impression there was a northern dragon in the city. At the same time, some others hoped to see whether the flying ship had wings. There were even some who came to see the Sorcerer of the North. Now that was an interesting name the Braavos had for his brother. Jon supposed they only knew about Harry's magic and not the others with similar powers in Avalon. Maybe even more terrifying powers, Jon thought, staring at the back of Alcera's head. Out of all of Harry's students, Alcera Snow's powers were the most terrifying. She could create anything out of her own blood. Under Harry's tutelage, that power had only increased several folds, allowing her to make magical constructs without the aid of her blood. She could also use spells like Harry, while her brother was a powerful warg. He had not heard much about House Forrester from old Nan, but he supposed they must have had ancestors with powerful magic like House Stark. While the North remembers was a popular saying back home, Jon thought they had forgotten quite a lot. If not for his brother, the North would have never rediscovered the wonders of magic, and perhaps there was still a lot to find, not just in the North, but across the world. They passed by some remote parts of the harbor where barges of firewood were being rowed in by people. Men and women hung around the edges of the canal with fishing poles in their hands. Snake boats passed through thin channels carrying flowers and other merchants' wares. There was a hint of a fog hanging here and there in the city. There was a rosy tint of a smell hung loosely in the air that Jon found pleasant. He flinched, however, when the Titan roared. The sound was faint, but he heard it nonetheless. When he looked around, he saw that the people of the city were hardly bothered by the roar of the Titan. The Braavosi guides. They had led them towards a couple of snake boats in the harbor. Jon looked uneasily at Robb, who was afraid to get into the boat, but they had no choice but to follow through as their insistence on visiting the Titan got them here. I like these boats. Maybe we should build a few of these and have a boat race in the White Knife every year, Harrion said with a smile. Jon held on to Robb for dear life as their boat wobbled dangerously whenever anyone moved so much as an inch. I hope he is joking, Robb muttered. Knowing Harry, I'm afraid he might be entirely serious. Jon muttered back. These snake boats are sleek and fast, perfect for races. Having men compete in snake boat races might also deliver some competent oarsmen in the fleet. Harry thought aloud. Told you. Jon mouthed to Robb. The Titan of Braavos was not just a stone sculpture that shouted out the architectural ingenuity of Braavosi sculptors and stonemasons. It also acted as a lighthouse and fortress. Some of its chambers were open to the wealthy for parties and other recreational activities. Jon had no idea how much silver Harry had to spend for the entrance, but he assumed it was quite a sum. Their boats reached the island where one of the massive legs of the Titan was fixed on a mountain of black granite. Soldiers lined the steep ridges of the island, keeping their diligent watch over the waters surrounding the island. Soldier pines lined most parts of the island in dull green, reminiscent of those in the north, with their broad leaves in russet and gold, signs of the advent of autumn. Jon was expecting a long flight of stairs to the top of the statue, but he was surprised to find a gilded cage of bronze worked by a winch at the foot of the Titan to take them above. He kept an ear out for the Braavosi guides as they explained the history of the Titan. He knew some of the stories thanks to old Nan. The Titan first roared during the uncloaking of Braavos. Since then, a 10-day festival of masks and revelry has been held in the city to celebrate the uncloaking. At midnight on the 10th day, the Titan would roar, and the citizens were required to remove their masks to signify the uncloaking of the secret city. The guides continued to regale them with the tale of how the escaped slaves of Valyria commandeered ships from their masters and built a city far away from the sites of the Dragon Lords. He suspected it was an attempt to take their minds off the fact that they were not hundreds of feet above the island. Gales of wind swept by as the bronze cage climbed all the way to the waistline of the colossal statue. Suddenly, the cage stopped moving, coming to a stop above the waist of the statue. The cage suddenly started to move towards the statue. Employing several pulleys, A door suddenly opened on the statue, right as the cage neared the statue's bronze midsection. Please follow us. The guide stepped off the cage into the door after opening the gates. Jon was mystified once he stepped into the interior of the statue. There was an expansive chamber inside the statue with a gleaming white marble floor and several gigantic stone pillars. There was so much to see inside the many halls and chambers. They were filled with murals, stone sculptures, carcasses and tusks of Norvosi elephants, and many other great works. There was an entire chamber dedicated to peacocks from the Summer Islands. Those majestic creatures would dance when there was rainfall, which was one of the major attractions, according to the guides. The roar of the Titan came out of nowhere, making Jon flinch. This time he felt a tangible sense of magical energy touching his senses. Unlike last time, he could feel his senses expand and his blood calling out to the source of the sound. I felt it as well, Elsera whispered from beside Jon. What do you think it is? Jon asked after overcoming his surprise over the fact that Elsera was speaking to him. I don't know. There are tales about a Horn of Winter used by Joramun, a king beyond the wall, and woke the giants from their slumber. You think the Titan hosts the Horn of Winter? Jon asked incredulously. Of course not, but it must be something similar, Elsera said. Jon nodded thoughtfully, seeing the merit in her argument. I suppose it'll become clear tonight, Jon thought. He eyed Harrion, who nodded at him, confirming their private trip to the head of the Titan would go ahead as planned. The Song of Steel filled Harry's ears as he came across the famed Moon Pool. The Moon Pool housed not one, but many fountains in the area. He supposed these fountains were necessary because this was the usual spot where the Braavosi came to practice their water dance. Men and women who could afford teachers in the personalized style of swordplay practiced diligently from early morning. There is a certain elegance to it, Harry observed, watching the Braavosi perform their martial art in public. Their movement was fast and fluid. The water dancing style depended on constant movement and less on strength, unlike the standard Westerosi style of swordplay. Is it true Braavosi learned the water dancing from the Rhoynar? Robb asked. It could be true. The water dance must have been based on an earlier Rhoynar style of swordplay, Harry said with a shrug. Sansa and Arya would love this place, Jon muttered. Indeed. Let's not rush to tell them, otherwise they'll run away from Winterfell and become Braavosi, said Harry with a snicker. After a couple of laughs at the expense of their sisters, they observed the water dancers at their best for an hour before they moved to another site. The next attraction they found was the Canal of Heroes. It was the largest canal in Braavos, located close to the Chequi port. There were many bridges built across the canal filled with sculptures of fish, crabs, squids, eels, and seahorses. There was even a bridge dedicated to the Sea Lords of the past. Seeing that particular bridge gave Harry the idea of installing a similar bridge across the Sunset Canal connecting the neck with the rest of the north. The bridge could be lined with the sculptures of the Winter Kings and former lords of Winterfell. The sculptures in the crypts could function as a basis for the new statues to be installed on the bridge. An idea also came to him about adding several fountains and gardens by the sidewalk on the bridge that could attract tourists. Perhaps even some closed-off areas from the open air could host murals depicting the history of the North. The more he thought about it, the more Harry found appeal in the idea. Those statues and art could also be convenient camouflage to install stone golems and hide runes that could defend and protect the bridge from hostile powers. I'll have to rethink the plan of creating a bland bridge solely for transportation across the canal, Harry mused. Harry was confident he could even add up some inns at the bridge if he could expand the current scope of the structure he had in mind. Of course, a structure that functions as not just a road, but also a museum and art gallery might make it more complex and drag the construction far longer than he envisioned. Not to mention the cost involved, but that was a small price to pay because the returns he stood to gain far outstripped any initial investment. For centuries, the King's Road that connected the neck to the rest of the North was the lifeblood of all traders in the North. And the Riverlands, there was bound to be a disturbance in that trade traffic once the North developed a dedicated merchant fleet, but land trade would not stop altogether. It'd be far cheaper for traders from the Vale and the Riverlands to trade their wares in the North through land routes. Besides, the chief attraction of the Sunset Canal would be for usse merchant ships seeking to avoid the stepstones. After spending some quality time on the many bridges near the canal, they went straight for the Temple of Moonsingers. The Moonsingers were the priestesses of nomadic raiders who lived east of the Bone Mountains. Their religion came to Braavos when the rebel slaves took Valyrian ships to escape their captors. Supposedly, the priestesses of the tribes divined the safe location for the slaves to land, which later became Braavos. The Moonsingers worshipped the moon goddess named Thea. According to their tour guides, their temple was the largest and most beautiful in Braavos. The temple was built using white marble with a dome made entirely of glass, depicting the moon's different phases. They were also fortunate to attend a sermon session conducted by the priestesses. Instead of long and tedious philosophical talks, the sermons of Moonsingers were conducted by singing songs praising their goddess. Harry found some of the songs he heard pleasing. The language of the Jogos Nai sounded very similar to ancient Sanskrit, but with a flair for romanticized phonetics and melodic notes in expressing certain emotions. It almost felt like Harry was listening to a fusion of French and Sanskrit influences in the language of the Jogos Nai tribe. He found the whole religion and the Moonsingers interesting because he felt a benevolent vibe from the temple. Ever since he killed the drowned god and amassed its power in Godkiller, Harry had been learning to feel the gods active in the world. He could get a general feeling of their intent and energy whenever he was close to their places of worship. The gods of Westeros were cold and callous in their attention given to the mortal plane, save for a few, like the drowned god. So, coming across a spirit entity whose aura radiated benevolence and acceptance was a first. Harry was so impressed, he asked for the core religious texts of Jogos Nai from the Moonsingers, which they were happy to oblige. That particular decision was also influenced by the realization that a keyholder of the Iron Bank was a priestess in the room in his routine surface scan. There were so many places to visit in Braavos, but they returned to the manor by noon and rested till evening. The rest of their visits to the other temples in the Isle of the Gods were rescheduled for another day, as they were invited to the Sea Lord's palace. "It seems the Sea Lord is now prepared to talk with us about the canal," said Robb after the messenger from the Sea Lord's palace left their manor. "What do you think will he ask for?" "Favorable tariffs for Braavosi ships and security from the Ironborn raids, of course, but he'll also be aware of my plans for a northern bank. The Iron Bank will sound its concerns to us through the Sea Lord," said Harry. "Concerns?" Robb asked with a frown. "They don't want any competition in Essos." "Are we planning on competing?" Robb asked. "Of course not. The bank has not even started yet. It'll take decades for the bank to build a reputation to extend credits to foreigners. Our bank will be solely for northerners." "So like the Hightower Bank, then?" "Yes, like the Hightower Bank, but far more expanded." Harry nodded. The Hightower Bank only functioned in Old Town, and it was more or less holding all the loans given out by House Hightower inside Old Town. The bank Harry envisioned for the North differed in its function and scope. Ideally, he wanted the bank to function like the Iron Bank, but he was realistic in his approach and realized that was not possible anytime soon. Therefore, he hoped the bank could be used to slowly expand from Winterfell and Avalon into other parts of the North to empower small businesses in the villages. But that also came with several challenges. He needed dedicated staff for the bank to function. The lack of basic education among the North's nobility and small folk was a serious hurdle. All the more reason to start a school and recruit scholars for the school, Harry thought. Harry, Robb, and Sir Wylis Manderly sat across from the Sea Lord and his advisors. The Iron Bank also had several representatives, including Titus Etrion. "Any agreements we make today are not final and will be subject to further negotiations. Is that acceptable to you, Heir Stark?" Varego Antarion said. Harry observed the Sea Lord of Braavos. The man was bald, and the little hair he had left was pure white. The Sea Lord did not look well. The man suffered from a fever, or the Sea Lord suffered his age. "Of course, honored Sea Lord. Lord Eddard Stark is the Warden of the North. Only Lord Stark can finalize the agreement from our side." Sir Wylis said, "We are here solely to discuss terms of the agreement and to study any concerns raised by Braavos." Harry further added, "Good. Then let's proceed." They haggled for the toll to traverse the canal for the next half an hour. It was agreed upon that tolls would be collected using silver for the ease of currency exchange, as Associ polities commonly use silver rather than gold. The Sea Lord proposed to use Lysini silver as the standard, but Harry wanted silver moons of Westeros or Pentoshi silver. That particular issue was left to be discussed later. Harry also asked for 180 silver moons, or its equivalent in Pentoshi silver, as the transit fee, including access to ports on either side of the canal for a day. If the ships dallied longer in the ports, they'd have to pay extra port duties. But Harry and Rob made it clear that the 80 silver moon fee was an offer they'd accept if paid in Volantine silver as well. After all, the silver from Volantis was much better quality than Lys, even if Volantine honors are smaller in size. The Braavosi understood they'd have to pay a higher toll if they insisted on Lysini silver. Harry suspected the Iron Bank had somehow gotten hold of the Lysini market if they insisted on Lysini silver instead of Pentoshi silver or Westerosi silver moons or stags. The only Westerosi coin the Free Cities traded in was the gold dragon. Most Associ merchants avoided the silver coins of Westeros in favor of Associ silver in trade across the Narrow Sea. This was a troubling prospect for the North till now, as their traders hardly had anything to sell in the Free Cities, which left them fully short of Associ silver. This forced them to pay in gold for all spices from Assos, which had severe ramifications for the North's economy. But that was no longer the case, as the glass trade brought some much-needed Pentoshi silver and Volantine honors into the North. Having more Pentoshi silver would only enhance the spice trade, especially with the canal in place. Harry was hoping to ink some deals with Pentoshi magisters for northern merchants to buy their spices in bulk, so that they could sell them in the Westerlands, the Riverlands, the Iron Islands, and the Reach. The next order of business was the Ironborn, and Harry thought that was a more contentious issue than the tariffs. 180 silver moons were nothing compared to the risks taken by merchant ships to avoid the pirates of the Stepstones. Even with the arsenal, Braavos was hardly insulated from the troubles faced in the Stepstones. Most of their ships had to pay the heftier price for their cargo and life to sail safely from the Stepstones. After all, Braavos could not project their naval strength onto the Stepstones without eliciting a similar response from Lys, Myr, Tyrush, Volantis, and the Iron Throne. Those concerns were also applicable in the case of the Iron Islands. In our eyes, we see no difference between the Ironborn and the pirates of the Stepstones. How can we be sure the Ironborn won't prey on our ships as we exit the canal into the Sunset Sea? The Sea Lord asked. The islands of Blacktide and Harlaw are now part of the North House Tallheart, now rules the island of Blacktide, and Harlaw is under my supervision. Nothing moves in those two islands without my knowledge. The Iron Fleet has been reduced to a couple of small fishing boats, and will remain that way. My ships are spread out in this area, and we can guarantee that our ships will protect all ships transiting the canal. If that is not enough, there is another option. Harry fished out a leaf of parchment and offered it to the Sea Lord. He waited for the Sea Lord and his advisors to read the contract drawn up. That is a contract we hope to offer for any ship that transits the Sunset Canal. It's a guarantee to reimburse the ship and its contents if the ship is lost to an Ironborn raid, so long as the ship is insured and its contents are known to us beforehand. Rob explained. Harry shared a look with Rob. This was their plan to rope in some investments from Essos into their bank. Rob initially brought up the idea when he suggested offering a paid escort to Essosi ships. While Harry shot down that idea, Rob's suggestion made him think about insurance companies for the Muggles. This is an intriguing proposal, the Sea Lord said after conversing with his advisors. We'll need more details about how you value the ship and other details. That can be easily arranged, said Rob, nodding at the Sea Lord. But we're still concerned about the Ironborn. Westeros is not politically stable all the time. We've seen the Iron Throne shift its priorities and allies in the past. Even though King Stannis has worked tirelessly to cull the threat of the Ironborn, it might not persist. If a direct order comes from the Iron Throne to hand over the islands to the Ironborn, wouldn't you be forced to do so? House Baratheon is not House Targaryen, and there are no dragons to force the North to cede our lands at the whims of the Crown. My fleet is more than enough to protect our interests in the region. Harry stared firmly into the judging eyes of the Sea Lord and his advisors. How many ships do you have in your fleet, Lord Stark? Ferrigo asked. I have 38 war galleys, excluding my airships and merchant galleys. Within the year, that number will cross 50. Once the canal opens, I was hoping to buy more war galleys from Braavos and Pentos, said Harry with a shrug of his shoulders. But he knew his interest in buying ships from Braavos would sway the Sea Lord and his advisors. Ships were expensive, and Braavos had more than a lot of ships than they'd need. This had left their shipyards in a bind with only repair works in the last few decades. There had been no major conflicts for the arsenal to engage in usse waters, save for the occasional pirate in the sea. Therefore, Harry knew the Braavosi would jump at the chance of reviving their sleeping shipyards. The increased chatter among the Sea Lord's advisors was a prelude to that. Harry maintained a poker face, as did the aging Sea Lord, but they both knew the negotiations had entered a far more relevant phase. Tell me something, Lord Stark. Heir Stark. What'll happen if the Ironborn rebels again, but the Iron Throne does not want to involve its fleet in the conflict? Ferrego asked, steepling his fingers. House Stark will annex the entirety of the Iron Islands and destroy the Ironborn culture for good, with extreme force. Harry answered promptly, Is this the position of Lord Eddard Stark? The Sea Lord asked skeptically. Theon Greyjoy is a ward of House Stark. It's our hope that, in time, the Iron Island would have a new beginning with Theon as Lord of Pike. If that's not possible, winter will come for the Ironborn, Harry said without missing a beat. I see. Ferrego went into a thoughtful silence for a moment. In that case, we have much to discuss, Lord Stark. Heir Stark. The negotiations went late into the night as they hatched out some more details before coming up with several major points they agreed on. Now, all that remained was the wording of the overall text of the deal before being sent for review to Winterfell. The upper levels of the Titan were crawling with soldiers of Braavos, but Harry and Jon quickly walked through the different levels uncontested under the Disillusion charm, and notice me not charm, there was a lift operating inside the Titan that allowed the soldiers to transport their provisions from different levels. But they didn't use the lift and instead chose to trek the structure using the stairs. They saw every nook and cranny of the Titan until they finally reached their destination. The head of the Titan was supposedly 400 feet above sea level. The outer shell was made entirely from bronze, while the inside was layered with granite and wood. The floor was layered with painted ironwood, while huge glass panes were kept at the eye holes of the head. Harry found it interesting to note that the glasses were arranged to focus light outwards. There were also huge mirror panes near the eye holes. The huge fires that burned inside the head provided the guiding light for ships to sail around the lagoon safely to the city's harbors. He supposed the lights could also be used to find enemy ships in the dark and even guide them to crash into the lagoons, if they so wished. It didn't take them long to find the chamber where the Titan's roar came from. It is a horn, after all. Jon whispered in awe when his eyes fell on it. His imagination had been running wild ever since speculation began about how the Titan made the sound. Harry had jokingly told him that the sound must be created by the haunted souls of the enemies of Braavos. He knew that wasn't true, but that didn't stop him from having nightmares about ghosts living in the Titan's head. Not an ordinary one either. Look at these glyphs. Harry pointed at the nearly faded runes carved on the horn. Another interesting thing Jon noticed was that the horn was gigantic and pitch black in color. Also, most of the horn was encased in bronze, making it hard to discern the material used to build the horn. Jon cautiously reached out and touched the surface of the horn that was not encased in bronze. It was rough, but also hard and cool. Dragon bone. The horn is made of dragon bone, said Harry, surprising Jon. Where would the Braavosi get dragon bone? Jon asked confusedly. The Valyrians must have made the horn before the Doom. The Braavosi might have come to possess it when they escaped with Valyrian ships from the Freehold. The horn might have been a family heirloom of a dragon lord of Valyria, said Harry, with a gleam in his eyes. Jon looked at the horn with renewed interest. His eyes traced the delicate contours of the black bone of the dragon until he saw the gleam in Harry's eyes. We're not stealing the horn, right? Jon asked for clarification. Oh, of course not. It'd be a dishonorable thing to do, Harry immediately said, but Jon saw his brother staring longingly at the horn. Come on, we should go, said Jon, pulling Harry away from the horn. No, wait. I'll just need to copy down the glyphs. It'll be good to have them cross-referenced later to understand what they mean, said Harry, breaking away from Jon's hold. Jon could only shake his head. I suppose it's better than outright stealing the horn? The next day, the airship took to the sky after finalizing the text of the final document with the Sea Lord. Their destination was Andalos, and from there, Pentos. I'll make. Jon, why is the Titan silent? Robb, Maybe the men are sleeping on the job. Jon and Robb look suspiciously at Harry, who raises his hands in surrender.
Harry, I had nothing to do with it.
Alcira, hey, look what I found in our ship. It's a cool-looking horn. Jon and Robb stared intently at Harry again, who shrugged his shoulders with a guilty look. Harry, it's stolen property of the Valyrians. I promise to return it to its true owner. Robb deadpanned. The Valyrians are dead. Harry smiled brightly. Harry? Yay. I can keep it then. Harry kept a keen eye as he slowly moved the Valyrian steel knife along the hard edges of the dragonbone in his hand. He had cut out several pieces of dragonbone from the remains he found in Skane. He had planned to make some dragonbone bows out of the bones in his possession, but that plan had been put on the back burner for years. It was mostly because he had been distracted with the affairs of Avalon and other issues in the north. Even now, he couldn't see much use in making a dragonbone bow, but he wanted to test whether dragonbone would function as a better magical foci. It was a last-ditch effort to see whether he could create a wand fit for Jon or Alcira. Even with a Valyrian steel knife, it was pretty difficult to file away the unneeded portion of the bone. The dark material was filled with iron, making it as strong as steel, yet lighter and more flexible. However, it wasn't easy to make anything using dragonbone. It was a hard, unyielding material to work with. Even with Valyrian steel, the dragonbone part sitting in the palm of his hand gave Harry a lot of trouble. Maybe I should invite a master craftsman skilled and experienced in working with dragonbone to Avalon, Harry mused. He continued to grind the dragonbone piece for a few more minutes until he was finally satisfied with its current dimensions. The dragonbone piece was now as long as his little finger with half an inch in thickness. Harry took out his supply box where he kept all the specimens he collected for making wands. He found the wood section all clearly marked for easy access. His eyes ran over maple, pine, weirwood, oak, elm, and many others until finally his eyes struck on yew. You wand with dragonbone core. Harry muttered to himself as he frowned and thought. He picked the wood from his supply box and held the core close to the wood. Harry prodded the wood and the bone fragment with his magic to see whether he could feel any resonance. There was a faint pulse of energy coming from the two objects, but he couldn't discern what it meant. He was no skilled wand maker and mostly went at this with trial and error. Still, he made a quick note in his diary about the pulse of magic he felt. He hoped future wand crafters might find his notes helpful to develop the craft. He chose yew for this particular wand because Alcira's power also had a strange congruity with the properties of yew. Yew wood generally bonded with wizards influenced deeply by the powers of life and death. It also had the ability to streamline the chaotic and powerful magic of wizards. In his observation, Alcira's magical abilities of manipulating her blood were fascinating. It was also something he never encountered. He had read of blood mages, but they were fanciful accounts based on rumors and wild imaginations. There were no first-hand accounts about such wizards or witches. But Harry trifled with small-scale blood magics to some extent, but he was never born with a proclivity to such magics. Alcira was not like him in that aspect, and Harry knew this in his bones. She was born a blood mage, so she had the innate power to manipulate her blood to do her bidding. He hoped the yew-wood would accept the bone of a willful dragon that fought till the end to protect its offspring. It's a shame I can't get my hands on dragon heartstrings. That'd have been the ideal core for this wand, Harry mused. He suspended the dragonbone fragment with his magic and dipped it in the green-colored potion he had made using the sap from the heart tree of Avalon. The dragonbone, surrounded by the green paste, was carefully placed inside the incision he made on the yew wood. Harry sealed the wood close and carefully placed it on a stone tablet. Placing his hand on the stone tablet, he flared his magical power, and the runes carved on its surface flared to life. The runic script on the stone tablet began to appear on the wand's outer periphery in miniature script. Rune transference, my greatest discovery, Harry thought with some pride. It was a new method of enchantment that he developed recently. It was an unintentional discovery. As he intended to create a template for creating a spellforge that could automatically transmute regular steel into Valyrian steel. While he failed in that aspect, he developed rune transference. With this new method, he could instantly transfer a runic script into an object, thus avoiding manual carving. Right now, the wand was enforced with the aspects of character, power, and spirit. By enforcing these aspects into the new wands, he hoped the wands would gain better communication channels with a wizard's magic. It should theoretically help with the bonding process. "What's that funny light?" Jon asked, as he emerged from the trunk. Harry looked up from his work to see only his brother's head could be seen from the enhanced space inside the trunk. "Fed Snuggles. Did you?" Harry asked with an annoyed look for interrupting the moment. "Stop calling him that. His name is Sundancer," said Jon, climbing out of the trunk. "Sundancer? What a silly name," Harry said with a snort. "Oh, and Snuggles is such a terrifying name. I could feel the awe and majesty of a dragon with that name." Jon mocked. "Don't you have something better to do other than annoying me? Or do you prefer your hair color to become orange for the rest of the journey?" Harry threatened. "What's that you doing?" Jon asked with a sigh, changing the subject. "Coward." It's so easy to threaten him by threatening to blemish his curly hair. Harry thought amusedly, "I'm making a wand." "Oh, let me try then." Jon reached out with his right arm, but Harry swatted it away. "This one is for Elsera. Weren't you that one who said the wand chooses the wizard?" Jon asked with a raised eyebrow. "Fine," Harry huffed. "Give it a try." Jon picked up the wand and gave it a swish. He was blown off his feet the moment he finished the motion with the wand and smacked his head first against the wooden wall of the room. Harry roared with laughter, seeing his brother on the floor moaning in pain. "Perfect!" "This will do," Harry said, picking the wand from the floor while chuckling at his brother's plight. A few minutes later, Elsera sat before Harry while Jon was nursing a small bump on the back of his head. "The last wand I had crafted for you was responsive, but I believe this one would find better synergy with your magical power," Harry said happily as he looked between Elsera and the U-wand. "Give it a try. Go on." Harry nodded giddily, looking eagerly at the witch. Elsera shot a worried look at Jon, who was holding a cube of ice against the side of his head. "Don't mind him." Harry patted her shoulder in encouragement. "Now give it a wave." Elsera looked reluctant, but she squared her shoulders and took the wand into her hand. Sparks of colorful lights showered from the wand's tip while a gentle whirlpool of wind formed around Elsera. The effect died down after a moment, and Harry jumped on his feet, clapping in celebration. "Congratulations, Elsera. This wand has chosen you as its mistress." "Wow." Elsera breathed out in excitement. 12 inches long, made of yew and dragon bone as its core. With this wand as your companion, you'll find that no spell would elude you and your raw magic bending easily to your will. Harry explained. "Do you think I can make a castle like you did?" Elsera asked with a strange gleam in her green eyes. "Maybe you should focus on charms and transfiguration for now," Harry said with a chuckle, seeing her enthusiasm. Harry found that the airship had come to a halt in the sky. He noticed that when he looked out of the window and found the same hill he had seen later. "Hey, Jon. I think the ship stopped," Harry said as he looked through the glass window. "Maybe we reached the Velvet Hills," said Jon. Soon? We were only over the Braavosi coastlands half an hour ago." Harry disagreed. Braavos occupied the western parts of Andalos after they won the area from Pintos. The western coastal area of Andalos was flatlands that gave Andals access to the narrow sea. It was the place where Theon Stark destroyed the last remnants of the Andal invasion forces. It was said the western coastlands of Andalos were filled with skulls of men, women, and children and their burning villages after Theon Stark retaliated against Andal invaders. But most of those lands were now under the control of Braavos, adopting much of Braavosi culture. The old Andal culture now only existed on the Velvet Hills near the Roine River. It was his hope that was the case because, according to Meister Luwin, most of Andal culture in the region had eroded. The political instability brought forth by the rapid migration of Andals, consecutive wars between free cities, and regular raids by Dothraki hordes had reduced the region to rubble. Andalos was now filled with scattered villages, nomads, and slavers. Still, Harry wanted to visit the place for its historical significance, but he also had an ulterior motive. He wanted to check whether Andalos held any significance to the Seven. The old gods had the weirwood trees as their abode in the mortal realm. Similarly, Harry wanted to know whether the Seven had left something tying them to the mortal plane. He hadn't found anything matching a divine aura in the Sept of White Harbor. The fact that the Seven had so far not retaliated against the followers of the old gods for the destruction of the great Sept of Baelor was quite curious. Therefore, Harry suspected Septs were not tethering the Seven to the mortal plane. At least, not all the Septs. He had never visited the Starry Septs to test the theory. When Harry finally got curious enough about their abrupt halt, he got up from his workstation and opened the door. But a guard was standing outside, about to knock on the door. "Milord, the captain is asking for you." "What happened?" Harry asked curiously. "There has been a situation, milord. It's better if you see it." "What's going on?" John asked. "Let's find out." When Harry arrived at the command bridge with John in tow, they found Anya, Rob, and Alan poring over a map. "What seems to be the problem?" "Why have we stopped?" Harry asked. "We're lost, Harrian," said Rob. "Lost? How can we be lost?" "We followed the marked villages on this map to chart our course, but we've encountered several villages not marked on the map in the last hour." Anya reported, "Either the map is wrong, or we made a mistake," Rob added. Harry looked at the map they had taken from Braavos. A chain of villages marked on the map traced their path towards the Velvet Hills, which also put them on a straight line to Goyandro. "Where are we right now on the map?" Harry asked, looking at Anya. "We're not sure, my lord." Anya looked at him apologetically. "Take a guess. How far off are we from our set course?" Harry asked. "We counted 13 villages on the map along the way. After that, we've deviated from the path, so I can only position our ship on the 13th village. I can't say whether the ship went off course to the south or east." Harry shook his head at the useless answer before looking at the map. "Have you made a chart for these settlements you encountered?" "Yes, my lord." Manya immediately placed another map where she placed markers for the course she traced when she realized the ship had gone off course. "Take the ship back to the last settlement. We'll ask for directions," Harry ordered. "The villagers might get spooked by our arrival, my lord. They might not be as well informed as the rest of the free cities of Essos about the airship," Anya cautioned. "Then we'll remain inconspicuous. The ship can stay hidden, and we'll pose as travelers." It took him a few minutes to find the last settlement, but posing as travelers was relatively easy thanks to the prevalence of the common tongue. Harry chose to stay in the airship while Rob and John engaged the people in the village. While his brothers were securing the information they needed to continue their journey, Harry was looking at the map sprawled over the table. His initial plan had been to first go to Pentos and then follow the Valerian road east straight to Goyandro. The lost Rhinar city was a ruin, but there were small, scattered settlements. Most importantly, Goyandro was on the banks of a tributary of the Rhine River. He had planned to travel downstream of the river to arrive at the Velvet Hills and look for any signs of the Seven and their tether to the mortal plane. "Perhaps I should work on including a map of Essos into the airship for future reference," Harry mused. My lord. A guard barged into the bridge with a panicked look. "What?" Harry looked up from the maps. "Our lookout spotted an army coming for the village from the east," the guard reported in a rush. Harry immediately stepped outside the command bridge, and the guard led him straight to the spotter on the ship's port side. "There, my lord." The spotter pointed in a direction, and Harry followed the line of sight with his own telescope. Sure enough, he could see a large group of armed men riding horses coming their way. "It's not an army, it's a Dothraki colosser," Harry muttered. "To arms, all of you, and man the ballistas, archers in position." While the men aboard the ship rushed to take up their posts, Harry sent Anya into the village to retrieve his brothers as fast as possible. Harry remained vigilant on the ship, observing the movement of the colossus. However, his hope of avoiding a direct conflict with the Dothraki became slim when Anya didn't return with his brothers from the village. "Lord Harrian, they're drawing closer," Josera warned, holding a crossbow close to his body. "My lord, there is movement in the village. Lord Rob and John are standing guard at the village entrance with the men, while the women and children run westward." A lookout posted on observing the village reported, "Those fucking idiots." They want to play knight and defend the village from the Dothraki, Harry muttered furiously. All right, men, listen to me. We'll spare not one Dothraki rider. I'll position the ship over the village's entrance. If you see the Khalasar trying to go around our ship, you use the fire ballista to turn them into ash. Am I clear? Yes, my lord. A chorus of agreement came from the men aboard the ship. Harry maneuvered the ship close to the village at a suitable height and waited patiently for the Dothraki Khalasar to step inside the range of their bows and siege weapons. He let the invisibility spell and raised a protective shield over the airship. Attack. The twang of bowstrings, collectively releasing, reached Harry's ears. He watched the arrows sail through the air and rain down death on the charging Dothraki warriors. Archers, knock, loose. Another batch of arrows sailed into the battlefield, claiming the lives of screaming Dothraki warriors. Good thing they're not wearing any armor, Harry thought, watching the Dothraki warriors falling dead in droves under the assault of his archers. The fire-enchanted bolts were released from the ballistas. Several explosions of fire shook the battlefield, consuming the enemy horses and huge pockets of their army. Crossbow bolts were also reaping lives, as the crossbowmen pelted the Dothraki from the port side. The few strays that managed to escape the range of archers on the port side of his ship fell prey to the crossbowmen stationed at the starboard side. The lucky few who managed to escape fell to the sword of the defenders of the village. The screams of Dothraki men filled the air as their dead mounted on the battlefield. Despite the culling the Dothraki were facing and their inability to hurt the ship, they charged head-on to their deaths. They're killing themselves without any care, Josera said with a wince. Harry was about to jump in and use his magic, but a dark aura suddenly encompassed the battlefield. A coppery tint of blood lingered in the air before long shadows consumed the blood-soaked ground. The horses of the Dothraki warriors stopped charging into the battle and began to shake away their riders violently. Don't stop releasing your arrows. Harry ordered when his men stopped their attack to stare at the strange events unfolding on the battlefield. Is that? Josera stuttered with wide eyes. Yes, that's your sister's magic, Harry said, watching the events unfolding below with excitement. The shadows bubbled forth, and several figures emerged, made in blood-red and coal-black garb out of the shadows. These strange figures picked the fallen weapons of the Dothraki warriors and began killing the unhorsed warriors without a second thought. Harry stared at the dispassionate killing unfolding on the battlefield without a shred of regret or concern. As far as he was concerned, a dead Dothraki was a boon for this world. Kill them all. Show no mercy, Harry ordered to his men, despite many of the Dothraki warriors now trying to flee the field in terror of the magic unleashed by Ulcera. It took them a while, but the screams and wails of the Dothraki Colossus fell silent. However, the smell of blood and death hung heavily over the village. Harry had lowered the airship once the enemy had been thoroughly destroyed. Only a few injured survivors were left among the broken Dothraki Khalasar. No survivors. Kill every last one of them. Harry ordered the men. No! Stop! That's not how we should wage war, Robb objected. War isn't the principle of war to attack a defenseless village, rape the women, take the children as slaves, and leave the men dead for the crows. Harry asked harshly without minding words while glaring at his twin. No, Robb murmured. Then we'll not treat these barbarians worthy of such honor. They deserve nothing but the cold embrace of death. Our father taught us justice and vengeance are different things. We can take them as prisoners and let them serve at the wall, Robb suggested. But Robb, we're not in the Seven Kingdoms. Our laws can't judge these men, nor have they broken any laws, as I doubt there is any law here. John trailed off with an uneasy shrug of his shoulders. In a society where there are no laws to enforce justice, vengeance becomes justice, said Harry with an air of finality, before turning to the men. Kill them all! Spare none! Have their supplies and any surviving horses delivered to the villagers. The men nodded and went to work, while Harry faced the grateful, fearful, and awed looks from the villagers. Harry had managed to stay ahead in many wars simply because of his intuition. But that intuition could also become a cause of discomfort down the line. This was one of such days where his intuition was correct, but he disliked his intuition had been right. Defodio, Harry muttered almost lazily. The gouging spell struck true as it punched a hole through the screaming Dothraki warrior charging at him with a raised arak in hand. The young warrior fell dead with a hole where his lungs were supposed to be. But that young Dothraki warrior was not the only one left guarding the war camp of the Colosser they killed off outside the village. More were taking up their weapons as the Dothraki defended their camp from falling into Harry's control. "This is your opportunity. Kill these barbarians and capture the camp," Harry said to Robb, who looked reluctant. But his brother didn't have much of an opportunity for second thought as more Dothraki warriors came at them with their Arak held him. "Harryan," Robb called aloud as a warning. Harry didn't lift a finger this time to put down the hollering barbarians. He allowed them to reach closer, which forced Robb to act. His twin had his sword out and started defending himself. Battling a Dothraki warrior, Harry kept a close eye on the battle unfolding, but didn't interfere. "A little help here," Robb shouted as he dodged and danced around the bulky Dothraki warrior. "Today is our name's day. You should be happy I'm letting you enjoy a good fight," Harry said with a chuckle, watching his twin dance around with a sword in hand. "Letting me? I'm the older twin," Robb shouted as he deflected a strike. "Then it must be your lucky day to defend your loving younger brother from harm's way," Harry drawled. "I'm not so sure about the loving part." Robb shot back, making Harry shake his head. Taking careful aim with his wand, Harry applied the bodybind charm on the opponent facing his twin. When the charm took effect, the Dothraki warrior lost his footing, and his hold on the Arak slipped. The Dothraki warrior found his limbs locked in place in an instant. That was all Robb needed to stab his sword through his opponent's stomach. See, Harry made a sweeping gesture. "I'm a loving brother." The shield around him fluttered to life as an arrow bounced off against the protective barrier, protecting Harry. When he turned his eyes to the source, he found a horse-mounted archer riding towards him with another arrow on his bow. Taran Telegra. The dancing jinx impacted the horse, forcing it to dance on its four legs, which threw the Dothraki archer forward. Harry unsheathed his sword and slashed straight through the unprotected neck of the archer within the blink of an eye. The blood that splattered on his body made Harry turn up his nose. "This is why I dislike using swords. This is no civilized way of killing your enemies," Harry muttered reproachfully as he vanished, the bloodstains on his body and his blue doublet. Another Dothraki warrior charged at him with 2 Araks in hand while screaming the Dothraki war cry. It sounded like a horse was dying, and Harry got so annoyed, with a flick of his wand, a long red line cut through the neck of his opponent. This time, the shower of blood didn't hit him as he watched the man fall to his knees, losing blood from the wound, and the man stopped screaming, which was good in his book. But screaming barbarians were not a rare breed where he was right now, and Harry could see more than a handful still standing after the attack on the camp. "Let's speed it up, Robb. We got our name's day to celebrate and some places to visit," Harry shouted at his twin, who was engaged in a bout with another Dothraki warrior. "It's not as easy as you make it sound, brother." Robb shouted back as he ducked under a wild swing of his opponent and cut a line straight through the enemy's belly. Harry winced as he saw the contents of the Dothraki warrior's stomach spill onto the ground. "Don't look back," Harry warned before Robb could turn around. "It's not a sight you'd want on your mind while fighting a dangerous enemy." The fighting lasted for a few more minutes until all the Dothraki guards guarding their camp lay dead on the ground. "What are we going to do with these women and children?" Robb asked out of breath as he rested on the ground while cleaning all the blood off his sword. "They'll have to be taken in by the village. If these people somehow make it back to other Dothraki colossars roaming the plains of Essos, they'll end up in chains, and the other Dothraki forces to attack the village in revenge for what happened here," said Harry. "We could take them with us to the north," Robb suggested. "Do you think our people will tolerate them?" Harry inquired with a raised eyebrow. "No," Robb reluctantly answered. "They'll be in a land with different weather conditions and no knowledge of our language or customs. They'll be excluded from society and struggle for generations to get accepted among our people. So what you're saying is we should leave them here. Now we are getting somewhere. House Stark is responsible for the well-being of the North and its people. We are not the battered shelter of the world." Robb took a deep breath before nodding in agreement. "I think I understand what you're saying." But Harry was not willing to let Robb off the hook. Even though his twin had killed the enemy, the unnecessary compassion for enemies troubled him. He blamed the idiotic stories of Aemon the Dragon Knight, Ser Ryam Red Wine, and Ser Arthur Dane for influencing his brother. Jon was comparatively less influenced by the fake construct of chivalry because of his influence. Harry was also aware that the arrival of Garland Tyrell further influenced Robb. The idiotic notions of knightly honor, mostly seen in the tourney grounds of the Reach, were clouding Garland, which was transferred to Robb. He had hoped the experiences of the war in the Westerlands would have removed such notions from Robb, but clearly he was mistaken. Good, now there are a couple of prisoners we've captured that deserve a block and a sword to their necks. Are you up for it? Harry asked, looking expectantly at his twin. Robb trailed off with an uncomfortable look. Our ancestors did not rule from Winterfell with hopes and dreams that everyone around us engages with good intentions. They showed no mercy to their enemies with one hand, while with the other gave rewards to the loyal ones, said Harry, leading Robb towards the prisoners they captured after raiding the Dothraki war camp. Our people dream of freedom from the Iron Throne, and only House Stark can deliver that freedom. But freedom emerges only as a consequence of power, knowledge, wealth, and resolve. You are the heir to Winterfell, and one day you'd be crowned king in the North, but you must show resolve to look after the interests of the people of the North. Robb looked hesitantly at the foreign people before him. They were strangers in a strange land of even stranger customs. But Robb could not forget the lessons of honor and the importance of laws his father instilled in him. If we're not holding our own laws to be sacred enough to judge these people, what is the point of freedom? If we're not holding ourselves to a higher standard, what gives us the right to govern the North? Robb asked. Because freedom does not mean obedience to the laws of nature or the laws created by men. The trees never disobey a law. I never saw a mule steal. A wolf never lied to man about its nature. Yet, none of these creatures are greater than man. So why do you assume men of honor and chivalry are greater compared to the rest? Are you saying laws that govern us are to be discarded completely? Robb asked with an incredulous look. No, Robb. But there are times and places one must abandon laws and codes of honor. Then tell me, when does one abandon law and honor, brother? Harry felt like this was a turning moment, or maybe Robb was merely trying to slice into his convictions to see whether they could be reasonable. He didn't know what was going through Robb's mind, and that was the way he liked to keep it. Unlike everyone else, he had never used his skill in the mind arts against Robb. It was a line he drew because Robb was his twin. It was a line he hoped never to cross. So Harry gathered his thoughts before he answered. We'll be traveling to Volantis on our journey. You know this? Yes. Yes. Robb nodded slowly. When you're in Volantis, you're lawfully allowed to own a slave. Will you buy one? What? How could you ask me that? Robb exploded with fury in his eyes. Just be calm and answer my question, Harry said patiently. No, I won't buy a slave, Robb answered with a frown. Good. In the North, slavery is punishable by death. So, will you kill the slavers of Volantis while we are in the city? No, Robb answered. But that doesn't mean I support slavery. Of course not. But where is your honor, chivalry, and laws? Why are they not guiding you to act? Why did they become powerless in Volantis, but have power in the North? Because. I'll tell you why. Somewhere deep in your mind, you realize laws and codes of honor have boundaries. The laws of the Seven Kingdoms are bound within the boundaries of Westeros. I guess so, Robb said reluctantly. Then you understand the very nature of laws is to bind society. It is a shackle upon which people are bound. When Jaehaerys Targaryen ordered the new gift to be transferred to the Night's Watch, the North had to obey because House Targaryen made the laws, and we were forced to obey regardless of what our people thought on the matter. What does that tell you? Robb shook his head and looked lost. Power, Robb. Those with power decide the meaning of words. And what sort of words are to be put on laws? Those laws become shackles, and those shackles become the boundaries that distinguish kingdoms and empires. Those in power decide to derive morals from these laws and choose to apply them whenever it is convenient for them. Harry placed his hands on his twin's shoulders.
Don't you see the kings of winter have played this same game in the past? We drew a border and made a kingdom for the first men while the Andals were butchering their way through the south. At that time, a knight's chivalry was measured by the number of skulls of the first men and the children of the forest they took. The chivalry and honor in the North were found in killing those who invaded our homes and killed our brethren.
Our ancestors were strong enough to reject the fate that befell the South. The people of the North came together and crowned the wolves of Winterfell as their kings and fought against the Andals to protect our way of life. It has been nearly 3 centuries since we traded that freedom of the first men before the dragons. But dragons no longer rule us, said Robb softly. No, they do not. But their laws still bind us, their oaths bind us, and the very concept of the 7 kingdoms bind us. Harry nodded with a grin, leading Robb towards the bound prisoners. Harry could see Jon and the others were also there, and they were eyeing them with concern, but he paid them no heed. Now, if the North is to be free, what should we do? Harry asked, staring into Robb's blue eyes. The laws and oaths of the 7 kingdoms must be discarded. Robb answered, yes. Honor will be found in protecting the life and wealth of a Northerner. Your duty will be found in serving the needs of your fellow Northmen. Chivalry will be found among your fellow Northmen alone. This is how kingdoms are formed, and when this kingdom expands beyond the designated borders, an empire is born. I think I understand, Robb said after a moment of self-reflection. Good. Now judge them, Harry nodded at the prisoners. But judge them as a Stark, not as a Knight of the 7 Kingdoms. Coindroho was a wasteland in all but name. The ancient city of the Rhinar people lay in ruins despite centuries having passed since the Valyrians destroyed the once thriving city. Harry didn't know why the people in these lands didn't try their hands at reviving the city. Despite the destruction meted out by the Valyrian dragons on the city, the foundation was still there. There were grand canals, ponds, and aqueducts in the city, as did the base of the city. All anyone had to do was pull down the rotting structures and burnt stones of the buildings and fountains across the street and rebuild them anew. Years of neglect had polluted the water with mud and reeds, but it wouldn't be an impossible job to dredge the streams. The waters of Little Royne remained crystal clear like rainwater, and Harry was sure a new settlement could emerge at the riverbanks. Unfortunately, the people in these lands feared the city was cursed. That superstition facilitated attracting all the wrong sort into the city, like sellswords, brigands, petty thieves, and slavers. The stolen wares of the travelers taking the Valyrian roads nearby were sold here. The free cities most likely knew what happened, but they were happy to look the other way because of their disputes. Harry got the distinct feeling that the ruling class of the free cities were happy to keep vast tracts of land in utter chaos. Any sort of order outside their walls would deplete their hold on the populace they rule. The walls surrounding their city were not just to keep Eanes out, but to keep their people in perpetual bondage. The city is in a sorry state. I don't know why I expected more, Robb muttered as they walked on the streets, where bandits sold their stolen loot to merchants as far as Norvos, Quhor, and Volantis. Harry was happy to see Robb acting normal after what happened. He knew it was cruel to force Robb into a situation where he had to choose to execute the Dothraki prisoners, but it was too good an opportunity to pass up in Harry's eyes to teach the cost of power and the weight of responsibility that comes with it. He had no illusions about what lay ahead in the future. There were wars to come, and he'd rest easy if Robb and Jon were prepared to do whatever was necessary to win. Fickle things like the concept of honor and chivalry were good things during times of peace, but Harry only saw war in the days ahead. It's a shame what happened to the Rhinar. It had been a sight to see the famed water mages at the height of their civilization, Jon commented. Harry grunted, but otherwise remained silent as he shoved the thoughts in his kind away and studied the layout of the ruins of the ancient city. They were disguised as travelers, while the airship was cloaked under the invisibility spell. He sent out a pulse of magic, taking the feel of the place, and he was surprised to see the area was nearly devoid of any magical energy. "What's wrong?" Jon asked, noticing a change in Harry's expression. "There is no magic here. I had never encountered a place without magic before. It's almost as if the land had been drained of the last embers of magical energy," said Harry. "Maybe it's because the river is only a tributary of the Rhine," Robb said with a shrug. Harry doubted that. A complete absence of magic in the land would not happen without external factors. The fact that he was not picking up any divine energy in the area was another indicator that the local gods had abandoned the people and the region. He had found the Velvet Hills in the same state. There were some scattered septs high in the hills, but they were devoid of any divine power or magical energy. It was as if the Seven enjoyed their exclusivity from the mortal realm. Either the Seven and Mother Rowan took matters into their own hands and cut their losses, or the Valyrians were messing with powers they shouldn't have, Harry mused. Considering the usual playbook of the gods and the Valyrians, who aspired to be gods, he suspected the truth lay somewhere in between. Either way, Anelos and the old Rhoynar cities were at a dead end. "We should leave. There is nothing of worth here," Harry finally said. "Are you sure?" Robb asked. "We could look for the remains of other cities near the Rhoyne." "No, we're wasting our time here. This land is a wasteland," said Harry before turning away from the riverside. "Wasteland?" John exchanged a bewildered look with Robb. "Come, we should continue our journey. We'll follow the Valyrian road to Pentos," said Harry. Despite Harry's wish, they didn't immediately depart Goan Drohe. They spent some time in the bleak city at John's insistence. Most of their time was spent buying trinkets that took their fancy. Elephant tusks were the most valuable commodity in the place, except for some stolen jewelry and high-quality Mirish carpets. Strangely enough, there were also some dragon bones available in the market. Merchants claimed the bones came from Norvos, but Harry doubted it. It was not as if Norvos was swimming in dragon skeletons. "Did you find what you were looking for, my lord?" Anya asked once he returned to the airship. "I found answers, but none that I liked," Harry said with a sigh. "That's unfortunate, but you can take comfort in knowing Alcera's wand is functioning properly. Her blood magic has become far more powerful with the new wand." "Yes, this has not been a complete waste of time," said Harry with a thoughtful frown. "I suppose this is a good Name's Day gift as ever. Now, onwards to Pentos. We'll have a proper celebration of my 14th Name's Day in Pentos."